Everyone, welcome to our second session this morning.
Hey.
You're muted.
Sorry guys, we'll just wait for more attendees to come in and then we will get started properly.
Very excited about this morning. I think there's lots going on today.
People are dipping in.
Good morning all.
Okay, let's get going. Good morning, everybody. It is lovely to have you all joining us this morning. Obviously, we had an amazing evening yesterday evening, and we are into day 2 of the Women Ed Unconference. I am so excited to be here. We have our session starting and kicking off this morning with owning our bravery. And Palm is going to be running through a few things this morning. I will be adding bits in the chat. There are a couple of things we do want you to remember, our hashtags. I will add them to the chats. Please add bits and pieces to the chats throughout this morning and the rest of the day. And I will also add our Menti link. Our Menti link has 4 questions on it that we would like you to answer over the weekend. Palm, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second morning. Yesterday was phenomenal, it has to be said. We had a kind of sheer, just massive range of different people, contributions from Germany, MENA, so Middle East, North Africa, Northwest England, and West Midlands as well. So a real kind of range of our global community. Today, we go truly global, and that's what's really, really exciting. We had contributions from almost every continent. And I tweeted this morning saying that if we only had Women Ed Falkland Island, then we would be truly, well, apart from the polls, truly global. So today we've got contributions from Asia, Europe, Africa, Australasia, and America, which is just fantastic and always so wonderful to hear from that global community and how we've spread over the years. And next year, of course, I'm hoping it will be even more exciting because we've only just recently welcomed Women Ed Taiwan to the Women Ed community. So yeah, just some really exciting stuff. Morning, Bernie, from Melbourne. There you go. They go all the way from Australia. Hopefully the timing's not too bad. So we are going to make a start. Well, I was going to say we are going to make a start, but our first speaker isn't here yet. So I don't know if she's a participant or an attendee at the moment or not, but we were due to have Atia with us doing the first session this morning, and that was going to be focused on I think what the title of it was. Got it in on my paperwork, see, I'm so organized. Learning from failure. But is she there? Tash, I can't see her in the list there, so I'm hoping that Rebecca will kind of step in. I'll just throw that one at you.
Throw you in the deep end, Rebecca.
Rebecca, who is next at 10 o'clock. Rebecca, how do you feel about going a bit earlier? Is that all right?
Well, get me my nerves over and done with, won't it? So yes, I'm going to look at it in a very positive way. I'm very happy to, or I'm happy to wait, whatever you think's best.
Well, we'll go for putting you in now, if that's all right. Because,
okay, sure.
Atia isn't here yet, and maybe she'll join us. Maybe she's having a few trouble. I know that we were struggling a bit with some of the links this morning, so
no problem.
She's struggling with that. So thank you, Rebecca. You're amazing. Great.
You're welcome.
So let me just introduce Rebecca before we start. So Rebecca is, and this is really exciting, one of our newer networks, Women Ed Malaysia, a very recent network that has just started off, and she is going to be talking about where it went wrong and how it got better. She's an international head teacher and network lead for Women Ed Malaysia, and she's had a 25-year career, international career, spanning the UK, the Netherlands, and now Malaysia. So I'm going to hand over to Rebecca to tell you about where it went wrong and how it got better, which is such an intriguing title. I love that.
Oh, well, thank you. Can you allow me to share the screen? It's just saying it's disabled at the moment.
Okay. Might try that. You should be able to do it now.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much, Palm. And hi, Natasha. Natasha's our strategic lead out here in Malaysia. So it's lovely to see you. Lovely to see you all. And thank you very much for having me today. As Palm said, my name is Rebecca Finley, and I'm currently the head of primary at the International School in Park City in KL. It's about 20 to 5 here this afternoon. So it's the end of our Saturday. So as Palm mentioned, I first became a head teacher in 2009, and I've spent most of my career in the UK, but it wasn't until 2015 when I moved internationally, first to the Netherlands and then out here to KL. And I am the founding network lead for Women Ed Malaysia, which started in November 2020 with 3 other wonderful teachers. So my presentation today, I've included these 2 icons throughout. What I've done is I've used the Women Ed icon, which I'm sure you're familiar with, where I talk about things that I think are quite specific to us as women and as women leaders. And I've also included some top tips as we go along. So, when I put this presentation together, I was trying to think of how what I have to say can actually be of any use to others. I'm a bit of an introvert and I'm not particularly outspoken. And my preferred method of highlighting and challenging issues is actually to raise others and to share their stories and actions. And so as a result, I'm not really here to tell you my story, because my journey, as I'm sure many of yours has had its highs and lows, both professionally and personally. So I thought about, well, if I was watching me and having to sit through my presentation, what would I like to take away from a session? So what I've done is I've gone with some reflections and some takeaways. And the message I want to share really is that the way I've developed as a leader, the leader that I am today, is through actually my actions, through identifying mistakes, reflecting on how I can do better. So better by my team, better by my students, by everyone I work with and for, and, you know, to be resolute, to know myself better each day. Now, as a woman, you know, we're often hot-wired to focus on what went wrong and dwell on the fact that it happened. And we don't wish to be seen as weak or lacking in expertise. But for me, knowing my weaknesses is my strength, it's my superpower. So I want to share my secret weapon with you, and I carry it with me everywhere I go. In fact, we all do. And when things have gone wrong, I draw on this toolkit, and invariably things get better, much better. So emotional intelligence is a set of abilities I'm sure you're very familiar with that can be used to impact how we interact with people. And women are actually proven to have a greater ability in some areas of emotional intelligence, particularly self-awareness and empathy. And that's sometimes to our detriment, as I'll discuss later, but practiced regularly and used well, emotional intelligence can help us as leaders to navigate rocky roads and pave a smooth path to success. But emotional intelligence is becoming a buzzword, and you'll find it referenced across many articles and sites. However, what do you notice about these icons that I'm sharing here? For me, there's a real gender bias beginning to sit beneath the way that emotional intelligence is depicted. There's pastel colours, there's hearts, there's bright colours versus organisation. It might just be me. Have a Google, see what you think. Maybe you find a pattern. But to me, it creates an impression that when you look at icons that depict emotional intelligence, that it's fluffy, it's soft. Whereas intelligence itself, if we look at the IQ side of it, is organised and structured. And there's a rhetoric that despite the fact that these skills underpin every leadership action and decision you'll make, they're not equally as effective as knowledge. So I'm here to share that as I've honed my emotional intelligence skills, usually through like in-depth reflection after making mistakes, I've grown as a person and become far more successful as a leader. So what I've tried to do is unpick just a few key moments in my career so far where this reflection and self-awareness had led me to develop, to change and improve. So I'm female and I'm English. Put these things together and you get someone who tends to say sorry a lot. I've always used sorry and other apologetic synonyms in my everyday language, and I'd really never noticed. And it actually took me a long time to realize that saying sorry before asking for something to happen actually diminished anything I said in between. Well, what was I sorry for? Was I sorry for asking my team to do their jobs, for being the boss? Well, you know, for being fair or transparent? Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't apologise when an apology is needed. And Jill Berry, who I've seen is here today, has written a great blog about the power of apology, which I recommend. But when we were colleagues, Liz Free used to chastise me as well for also using the word just when I spoke. I'm just emailing to ask, or I'm just trying to explain. And she also helped me see that I was belittling my opinions and actions every time I used it, and she was right. And ultimately I learned that if I felt the need to apologise after making changes or asking for something to happen, I seriously had to consider whether I should be asking someone to do that thing at all. And if the answer was yes, well, actually, I do need this action to happen because it's necessary or the right thing to do, then actually my request doesn't warrant that apology. But if you're someone like me who's found it hard to crack this habit, this is a top tip for you. It can be a hard nut to crack, but this is a Chrome extension. You can download it, it's free, and it sits in your Gmail. And basically, when you write an email, every time you start using apologetic or indirect language, you get that little red squiggly line under the words, and it encourages you to reframe what you're writing. And it's helped me become far more direct in the way that I write, in the way that I present, and in the way that I share things that need to be done. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, having a strong sense of empathy is key to being successful, but it can be detrimental. So empaths, as many women are, encourage people to talk to them and have an easy to talk to nature. And I noticed from early on in my career that people chose to talk to me at work, they confided in me, and as a result, I felt quite honoured and privileged. Until I realised that, and it took a long time to realise this, that one of the reasons people liked to talk to me was because I was very good at alleviating their problems for them or finding solutions. I was 34 when I first became a head teacher, and the majority of the staff at my school were either older than me or had been at the school for a long time. And I was really keen to make my mark. And with that came that feeling of, you know, the imposter syndrome and, oh, if I don't know the answers or I'm not able to help, I'm going to look incompetent. So I was so keen to help and share my expertise that I would often, people would leave my company kind of feeling lighter because their problems had ultimately become my problem. Now that's okay, now and then. But if 3 people come to you with issues 3 times a week, that's 9 problems you've got to carry around on your back on top of your own burdens, which, let's be honest, we all have. And recently with the pandemic, I felt like those monkeys were increasing. Being very aware of staff well-being and the struggles of working parents, particularly like here in Malaysia, for 50 weeks now, we've been online, that's 50 weeks. You know, as a working parent, being online and looking after your own child, I became a virtual listener for the staff, for the team. And I felt that that was something I really needed to do. And it was okay. And it was great for my team because for those who needed it, it enabled them to then offload to me and then focus on their roles and do what they needed to do. But my goodness, it exhausted me and it really squashed my spirit. And, you know, ultimately, were people who spoke to me always aware that this had happened? I'm not sure. And it's hard to accept, but you'll not often be thanked for what you do or how you help. nor will you always receive the same help back in return. And I've learned to be at peace with this. Initially, I got very upset or, even maybe angry when this happened. And that was a mistake, because the only person that was upset and angry at the end of the day was me. So you need to be accepting. If you're going to be offering help and you're going to be supported, you're not necessarily going to get that back in return. But if I might just use a little bit of psychology here, this is transactional analysis. I did foster people to become dependent on me throughout my career sometimes. I like to do this and I didn't do it with intention. And I've learned I need to be really present in my actions to avoid it. So look, here in the adult zone, I should be turning up to work as an adult, and my colleagues should be turning up to work as adults. And everything we do, we should communicate to each other as adults. But when people become dependent on us, or if we encourage dependency, we become the parent and they become the child. And as a parent, we might clear all the obstacles out of the way to allow our child to succeed. And when you do this with your team, you'll get one of two results. They'll either do not learn the ability to think for themselves, or they can't handle it when a decision doesn't go their way. And from a child's perspective, that's when the tantrum happens. So there's got to be a balance. And as leaders, we want to create more leaders. So we've got to model effective behaviours to all of our colleagues to allow them to think for themselves. So number 4, I've never really been intimidated by my male colleagues or leaders throughout my career. But if I'm honest, it's other women leaders whose brilliant work inspired me, but also made me feel inadequate. Actually, no, that's not wrong. I made myself feel inadequate, but their brilliant work was something that I looked at and thought I could never do that. And I think it's because they had so many other roles and challenges as I did, and yet they had this amazing air of brilliance about them that I didn't ever feel I could achieve. And had I continued along this line of thought, I'd not be where I am today. So when I let go of worrying about how everyone else perceived me, and I realised if I simply spent some time learning from these powerful women, I could also succeed. And then as a result, I'm very lucky to have some amazing mentors, formal and informal, throughout my career, who I've been able to observe, to talk to, and share ideas with. But I had to go to them. I had to go to them and ask, please, can I come and talk to you? Please, can you tell me how you do this? Instead of sitting there in quiet awe, thinking, I'm never going to be able to do what you do. But I've never had a career plan. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I haven't. I've sometimes even fallen into roles or carved out roles that didn't exist before. And some people like to have a roadmap for where they're going. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's really, really useful. But I just want to say, if you find yourself, like me, taking the scenic route and switching off the sat-nav, that's not a bad thing either. You don't need to have a plan. So my final piece of leadership advice, or top tip or anecdote, if you like, is when I arrived at my previous school, I had 7 years of headship under my belt, and I became quickly disheartened that I was in this really big school and no one was coming and saying, Bex, oh, would you like to take the lead on this project? Or Bex, what do you think? Would you like to contribute? And actually, I got a little bit upset and had a bit of a shake of confidence. But after some self-reflection and looking again, using that emotional intelligence and looking at myself, I realised there's 500 plus staff in this school. Why was I so self-absorbed to think that the entire staff body had memorised my CV or knew what I'd done in my career? If I wanted them to know something, I had to tell them. And no one likes to be seen as a show-off. And as women, we don't always like to crow about our successes. But there are many ways around this. And in this instance, I recognised an area that I felt needed addressing. I wrote to the CEO, sharing my experience and also an unsolicited proposal of what I'd like to do. And actually, soon after that, I was leading on the project and the necessary was achieved. So please don't wait to be asked to lead. Speak up And remember, even if it's not in your job description, forget the hierarchy, offer your ideas and solutions and just go for it, because that's the best way to start learning and actually doing the leadership that you want to achieve. So I'd like to just end my tips on a personal note here. So when I was growing up, this image was how I imagined the perfect mum should be. And when I became a head for the first time, my youngest was only 7 months old. I even had my interview in maternity clothes. It was a bit crazy. And I had a very clear picture of being the perfect mum and the perfect head teacher. And my child was going to have the best packed lunches. She was going to have the most creative handmade costumes for book day, and her hair was going to be in the most elaborate braids you'd ever seen. Needless to say, it won't surprise you that to this day, my dear daughter won't eat anything I pack for her lunch. She attended a Disney Frozen party dressed as a Spanish flamenco dancer because it was the only dress I had in the house. And actually, she's learned to braid her own hair because she's had a desperate attempt to look presentable. So what I'm saying here might not be palatable to you all, but I actually don't believe that you can be everything to everyone. And you do actually have to make a choice sometimes, because I don't believe you can be 100% at work and 100% at home at the same time. But that's when you have to accept help. So I had a wonderful TA who would regularly offer to take my daughters home and give them dinner after school. I was so embarrassed and ashamed that someone was having to feed my children that I would decline. And then, of course, the next time I looked at the clock, it was 6 o'clock. We'd go home tired. There was no food because I hadn't been in the shop. Then I'd cook something really bad. The kids would become grumpy. I'd become grumpy. You know the pattern. I hope I'm not the only one. And I realised if I'd just accepted help, the children would have come home happy and we'd have enjoyed some mum and daughter time. So what I've learned here really is that no one offers you help unless they genuinely want to help. You know, people don't offer to help and then think, please don't say yes, please don't say yes. Well, I hope they don't anyway. So now I'm thousands of miles away from my family. I haven't seen my eldest daughter in 2 years due to COVID. And actually, I feel enveloped in support here because I'm not ashamed to say to my colleagues, will you help me? So remember, accepting help does not mean you're a failure. It shows strength. So now's the time to draw on that secret weapon of emotional intelligence. And remember, no one expects us to have all the answers. Be more direct with your communication. Support others in solving their own problems. Seize the day you don't need a plan. Initiate a conversation, a project, a partnership, and accept help. And above all, keep calm and carry on, because your friends, your colleagues will have your back. And remember, no one expects us to have all the answers, but you do need to be open, ready to reflect, own your mistakes, listen to others, and above all, be true to yourself. Thank you very much. I hope some of the things I've shared have been useful to you. I'm sure as I go through my career, I will continue to make mistakes, and I'm okay with that. I'll continue to accept help, and hopefully my biggest thing, which is to continue to raise others and share the brilliant work that they do. Thank you, Palm.
Wow, Rebecca, that was absolutely brilliant. So many comments in the chat there that people saying that it resonated with them. It would be worth you going through the chat and actually looking at all the comments that came in. I can't believe you said you were nervous. That was the most poised and calm and professional presentation ever.
Bless you, I'm shaking.
You didn't come across like that at all. There was so much. I was making notes all the way through that. You know, some really, really handy tips like the little Gmail plugin. I love that idea. I think we could all benefit from that. But I think your point about the idea of just, we say it all the time, don't we? And how we kind of almost we kind of apologize for ourselves being, oh, do you mind if I do that? And we kind of need to own that space. And I thought that was such an important message. It wasn't there that thing, Shara, going around on email, email like a boss, wasn't there?
Yeah. And it is hard because sometimes you do have to ask things of your team that you know are going to be extra work, or that perhaps maybe as part of a leadership team you don't personally subscribe to things, but you know you have to toe the party line. And but by apologizing throughout it, it just makes everything seem weaker and makes it seem like, you know, actually you could just get it done. And it being more direct and still being polite and respectful, really important. And I don't think I'll ever be as direct as maybe might be optimum, but I do believe that being strong and direct in what I say gets me further and gets my team further.
That's brilliant. That's a really sound advice. Thank you, Rebecca. and particularly the whole kind of mother aspect there that you were talking about, that was so me. I just sent my daughter off in the rain to go to rehearsal. So that's the kind of mother I am. So I completely understand that feeling. Thank you so much. And thank you
You're
so
very
much
welcome.
for stepping in.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It was absolutely wonderful to have you. Okay, so that after that fantastic session and so wonderful of Rebecca to step in there, we've now got Atiye, who has joined us and is with us. Yay! Great to have you, Atiye. Thank you for the flexibility there. I love live recordings and how we have to adapt when the situation changes. So let me tell you a little bit about Atiye. I think this is her first unconference, isn't it? So attended every single unconference, but never had the courage to speak. So I'm so pleased that she has stepped up and been 10% braver now, and taken this opportunity. So 18 years in teaching with pastoral and academic leader roles, and she loves learning and developing others. So here is her session on, but that's my other sheet now. I'm trying to remember what your session is called here. It is learning from failure. So owning our bravery, absolutely fitting that kind of title. So can you share your screen, Atiye? Are you able to do that? You're still muted, by the way. We can't hear you, Atiye. Is there something wrong with your mic, or? Do you want to check that your speakers are on, your mic?
Yeah.
Hey,
Mic's
excellent. We can hear you now.
Okay, let me just try again. Yes.
Yep, we can see it.
Fantastic. Well, hey, okay. So I'm Atiye Ijaz, and wow, I'm a bit nervous, and I do not know how to follow Rebecca now. She's fantastic, and there were so many things that she was saying that I was saying, yeah, that's exactly it. That's my session done. So I'm going to talk to you about learning from failure. I'm an associate assistant head. I'm an NPQSL assessor and moderator. And even as I'm saying this to you, I'm feeling a bit like, wow, should I be saying that? Am I showing off? And that's what this session's about. I really believe that before we understand a situation, we need to understand the context that somebody's coming from. And that's why I want to talk to you a little bit about myself. Now, that's not a step-by-step, this is when I was born and this is what happened, but just for you to give, to understand a bit of context behind me. So I really believe that your story makes you an individual, and that's what makes you special. So I was born into a household which was really loving, but my mother in the 1960s had gone to college in Pakistan and was a very independent person, came to the UK and fell pregnant straight away. So, and came into a household where she had to cook and clean, and her confidence and her independence was stripped away from her. So that resulted in me being born, and for me to have 20 years of physical and mental abuse, because I was quite literally my mum's punching bag. And that meant that I was getting lots of messages around how I was insignificant, I wasn't good enough, I was bad luck, and that really I shouldn't have been born. So growing up with those messages, and these messages only being told to you when there's nobody else around, and as soon as your dad comes home or somebody else comes home, you put on this mask and you pretend that nothing's happened, has meant that I'm extremely resilient. So a positive out of that was I've learned to be able to cope with things and get on with it, because that was survival as well. So the messages that I was hearing, and my internal child kept telling me that I wasn't good enough, and that I felt like an imposter, and I lacked confidence. Roll on to 21, and I was told who to marry, and it was almost like an escape for me, which was great at the time. And I went into teaching because my mum said that it was an easy job. And little did I know that it wasn't. But I think it was the best thing that happened for me, because I went into an extremely brilliant school, and I had the best mentor and a gift that I was given, because this person believed in me. And I started in year 2 to become, I became a head of house, then became Key Stage 5 coordinator. And slowly I was now managing this internal child inside me who was telling me I wasn't good enough, but outwardly I was achieving these things. And so this constant conflict in my head that I know most of us face on a daily basis. So it meant that I was now starting to believe in myself, because these outward voices were telling me that I was good and that I was good enough and that I could make it. And yet I was having to curb the voices inside me. So I really do believe in your story making you special and making you the character that you are. And I really think about the story that you have in your past, you need to leave behind. Okay, take the good points, but leave the others behind. Love who you are now, and really think about who you're going to become. So I just wanted you to, oh gosh, I want you to think about what your story is. What makes you who you are? What are the characteristics and the skills that you've learned from your past? And I wish I could give you more thinking time, but I do want you to take this away, and I do want you to think about this. So the next thing was making sure that you have somebody who's supporting you, okay? And Jayshree Patel, the lady on the left, was the person who really believed in me. As soon as I started work, Parswood High School, 2002, this lady believed in me. And the power of having somebody believe in you when that internal voice is telling you you're not good enough is just undescribable. So she would push me, and she would nudge me into getting the next promotion. She would tell me that I was good enough, and I started to believe it, actually. And I then found myself going into Women Ed, listening to all these inspiring women, coming back and thinking, okay, I could do it, but then not taking action. And I did this for so many years, listening to all these great speakers. I enrolled myself onto Hannah Wilson's I'm Remarkable program. And again, I thought it was great. I was learning so many things, but I wasn't taking action. I wasn't still connecting with myself. And then I saw, I went on to Teaching Leaders. I had a great coach who kept telling me I was good, but I wasn't believing it myself. I've had some coaching from Catherine Lewis, again, who was telling me how great I was, but I wasn't believing it. And so that belief of whether you're good enough will actually come from yourself, and it needs to be unlocked. So Jill Berry, a superwoman that she is, believed and actually helped me unlock this. So she gave up many hours of her time to support me when I was going through applications, or when I just needed to be able to talk to somebody and just talk about where I was and what I wanted to do. So I really do think that having that power and going and seeking that support, like Rebecca was just saying, is not a weakness. In fact, it's actually a strength of knowing that you're stuck a little bit and you need to move forward, but you don't have the tools. So who is it that you would be able to go to be able to get that support? So recently I've joined an exceptional program called Women Lead Well. And it's a group of like-minded women who come together and talk about where they're up to, their struggles, and it's a really safe place. And really, for each and every one of us, just thinking about where is our safe place, where is it that we can go, offload, and somebody's genuinely going to want you to do well. Because like Rebecca just said, there aren't many people who will give you that support, and that you have to go and find it. So just for a minute, I just want you to think about who is it that you would go to for support, and where is it that you're going to seek this safe place? And then really, it's all about giving back as well, isn't it? So who are you supporting, and who are you being the Jill Berry for? And who are you going to help and support? So I know that throughout my journey, I've always believed in giving back, and I've always known that my time would come where I would be able to support somebody. And really this was my 10% braver in being able to stand up and say, right, okay, this is my story. And actually my story is good enough, because I've sat so many years upon years in these conferences and thinking, nobody'd be interested in what I'm saying. Nobody's going to learn anything from me. But actually, just being able to talk about it makes me feel better about who I am. And hopefully there's somebody sat there who might just pick it up to take up something from today. So thinking about who you would support and who are you going to be an advocate for, because it's all about paying forward, like Jill says. So I've been on this journey for 18 years now, and over the last 6 or 7 years, I've been trying to get an assistant head role. I know I was ready because I had the qualifications, I'd had the experience of being a head of faculty, pastoral lead, etc. But I just wasn't making it. I'd get shortlisted, so my letter seemed to be okay. But when I would get to interview, I didn't believe in myself, and therefore it wasn't portrayed. I went for an internal assistant head post, and I went for it 3 times. And I remember the first time when I didn't get it, I was absolutely gutted, and I went home, cried, but then had to get over myself, put on the mask. Next day, I remember wearing a really bright yellow dress, picking myself up and believing in myself. And it wasn't that I believed in how good I was, it was more the fact that I believed in something better would come, and that if I was able to show that I was okay, I would be okay. And really that fake it till you'll make it really does resonate. When you believe that you can do something, or believe that something better is going to come, it genuinely does. And so gaining feedback from people, and I've said chase because sometimes when you're going for a role, it's hard to be able to get feedback from schools, asking for it again and again. But even if you've not gone for an interview, chasing feedback from your colleagues, from your peers, and asking. And it feels, again, it's like being apologetic for asking for feedback because everybody's got so much to do, but actually asking for your strengths and weaknesses. And naturally, we'll go for our weaknesses first and not celebrate our strengths. So it's about making sure that we're getting that feedback and then thinking, okay, this is where we are right now, and how are we going to get to our next steps? So thinking about your journey, are you happy with where you are? Do you want to move forward? And if you do, what are you going to do about it? And really, who's going to help you? And what will that look like? And when are you going to do it? Because it doesn't just come to you. You have to plan for it. You have to go out and find the right people, ask for that help. And changing that inner voice, because we're so great at telling ourselves that perhaps we're not good enough, and perhaps there's somebody out there who's better than us. And just challenging and listening to that voice, because sometimes it might be an inner child, sometimes it might be voices you've heard in your past, sometimes it's a voice that you've learned over time with situations, and it's understanding that voice. but then redirecting it as well and saying, okay, that was my past and this is where I am now and I can do it, and visualizing yourself in that next step. So please don't wait to feel to be confident, and it's about faking it till you make it and owning your achievements, because we're so good at downplaying our own achievements, but uplifting others. So I could tell you 100 things about the colleagues that I work for and how great they are. But if you ask me what my skills are or my characteristics are and what's good about me, I'd really struggle. And Jill had really helped me with asking me to write those things down, and relaying those to myself, and really believing in what I was writing and talking about myself. I still find it hard. Had somebody on the during the week tell me I'd done something well, and I just needed to, I wanted to avoid the conversation and swiftly moved it on to something else and made a joke out of it. So I'm still learning, but it is about owning your achievements and learning from your setbacks that you've had. They're not failures, they're setbacks. And getting the feedback and really thinking, okay, this is why I haven't got this role, or this is why I've not made the next step. And this is exactly what I need to do to get there next. So recently I've turned 44, and my cousin, who's 3 years younger than me, takes great pleasure from the age of about 16, telling me how old I am and how I'm near the end now. So this year she pointed out very kindly that many women in our family don't actually make it past 65, and that haven't got very long to go. And that made me think about actually my leadership journey and where I am, because if I'm being really honest, sometimes I'll look around and there's people I started my journey with who are much higher than I am now, or people my age or younger than me who seem to be higher. But actually it's about you and your growth, because for my journey, I know that in the skill set and everything else, I had exactly what I needed. But if I didn't believe it in myself, and if I didn't actually work on myself and actually owning who I was and dealing with my past and being able to move forward, then no one else is going to give me that chance. And I always waited for permission. I've always waited for somebody to say that I'm okay in order for me to think I'm okay. I've always waited for somebody to say, why don't you go for that role, before I went for it. So we've got to check as to where we are now, and we've got to check about what are we going to do to really move on to our next steps, and how are we going to get there. So planning is important, and visualizing your next role is important. So just to finish off, really you define your own role. Nobody else is going to give you that permission to move forward. Nobody else is going to give you that permission to believe in yourself. And it's looking at the right ways and the right tools, and so many out there, to be able to access those and work on those. So thank you very, very much, and thank you for listening.
That was amazing, Atiya. Thank you so much. What a powerful, powerful story that you shared with us. I simply cannot believe, I think you're lying, that you're 44. There is no way.
Good makeup.
I don't believe you. There were so many comments there about your talk there, and I loved how you made a PowerPoint that you didn't actually go through it, you just spoke. So clearly it came from your heart, what you were saying, and it resonated with so many. One thing that I thought was particularly resonated with me was that point that you made about having gone to this session, and you went to that session, and ultimately if it wasn't actually there, that self-belief wasn't there. And when did you kind of find that? Because I think I do that all the time. I think I've got this and this, and yeah, deep down I don't believe that I can still do it. So where did you find that?
I found it through counselling. So I've been to many counselling sessions, and I've always gone with this intent of somebody telling me the solutions to my problems, but actually learning that no one's going to give me those solutions. And it's understanding my past, it's understanding who I am. And then that's positive self-talk. So Hannah Wilson was talking about how you have to listen to to these negative voices, but then actually channeling them and saying, okay, I've heard that, but I'm not that person right now. But also about faking till you making it. Honestly, just putting that smile on, standing tall, a nice pretty pair of shoes, and honestly just thinking, okay, I think I'm okay. That's Swan. Believing it on the outside, and just that paddling underneath. And I think that's way of life, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think but it's such a kind of, yeah, such a key thing, that moment of self-belief that you have when you actually know, actually, I can do this. I really can do it. And you did it today.
And you're never going to feel like, even now, I'm just sat there going, oh my God, I hope it was okay. But you're never going to have 100% of it. Never are you going to wake up one morning and say, right, I'm confident, I can do it all, I'm going to conquer the world. It is about that little 10% of just pushing yourself ever so slowly, ever so, like, just a little bit out of a time, and just saying, right, okay, I think I can do it. And even if you're saying I think, that's okay, because you're just pushing yourself forward.
Yeah, well, I put in the chat that I think you were more than 10% braver today. You were 50% braver. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and presenting your session. And I know that there are lots and lots of messages in the chat, so please do have a read of them. And
currently at my mum and dad's house, and there's a mouse in the room as I was talking, so I was trying not to scream.
You're being 100% braver then.
Right now.
Okay, probably time to leave then.
I'm sorry, I'm coming in for this one. I would have screamed. I'm not even going to lie.
I love it, and I've just got away.
Oh my gosh, you know, this is like a record. Wow.
And to keep such a calm face as well.
Yeah,
like we couldn't tell.
So like, oh, there's a mouse here. It's like, yeah, fine.
Oh, that's an unwanted guest there. Thank you so much, Asya. Thank you again for presenting, and hopefully we'll see you next year. That would be brilliant. Thank you. So we're still on time. Actually, we've managed to do really well this year so far, and no, or not too many disruptions. Some slight changes, but no disruptions. But now we're moving on to Australia. So we've been to Malaysia, been to where was that? Northwest UK, and now to Australia. And we've got, I think this is our first Australian speaker, which is really, really fantastic. And
fantastic.
Again, just
wonderful.
Part of that kind of wonderful global network that we've got. Hi, Bernie.
Hello, Pam. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So Dr. Bernie Moreno, I'll just do a brief intro to her. She is based at the University of Melbourne, which is fantastic, and her research includes new principles and their relationships with teachers and their work and environment, and the development of the school leaders, and lots of really interesting stuff. And I'm doing a master's at the moment, so all of that stuff resonates with me as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, all stuff that I kind of, you know, when you read this kind of research and you're involved in these diversity inclusion conversations, you really want to explore that sort of thing, don't you? So I'll certainly be looking up your research. I think I've actually read some.
Absolutely.
Right, so I'll hand over to Bernie, who is going to be talking.
Thank you. Can I share my? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I just wanted to share my screen. Have I? Okay, wonderful.
Brilliant.
Right. All right. Can you see that? Are you able to see that?
Yes, we can.
And you can hear me okay?
Yep, perfectly.
Wonderful. All right, excellent. Well, good morning. It's evening here. It's about 7 p.m. at night in Melbourne. We're still in lockdown. We're going out of lockdown little by little, so we still have quite high numbers, and our hospitals are a bit stretched, but we're hopeful that you know, very soon we'll be able to have a little bit more freedom. But in the meantime, I'm just delighted to be here. And so I'm going to read my presentation today, and then I've just got a couple of slides as well. So first of all, just to thank Women for the opportunity to be here. And already this morning, I have felt so many connections with Rebecca, with Atia, and you know, hopefully we'll be able, through my presentation as well, to see how these three themes as well can come a bit together. So my presentation today is structured around as a reflection, as a result of informal conversations with pre-service teachers, which I hope to convert into a research project in 2022. My presentation explores female teacher candidates' perceptions of self as future educational leaders, which I hope will invite us to reflect on the implications that this might have in our quest for greater women representation. But also I hope it will persuade us to act by recognizing that no intervention is too early, too informal, or too small when it comes to raising one's sense of self-efficacy, let alone the sense of self-efficacy of pre-service teachers around the world. Women representation in educational leadership appears to grow with every year, yet the long-established goal of equals within this context has not yet been achieved. For example, a survey conducted by the American Association of School Administrators found, amongst other things, that men are 4 times as likely to hold positions of leadership in education. Organizations such as Global Women-led Grassroots Phenomenon, currently with representation in almost 20 countries, is certainly succeeding in connecting and inspiring women in education to design and pave their way as educational leaders. Other organisations such as the Chartered College of Teaching and the British Educational Leadership Management and Administration Society are also examples of the ongoing commitment of such entities in transforming the educational leadership landscape to one that is more inclusive and gender equitable. As an active member of each of these organisations, albeit from Australia, I have access to the many resources they offer in educating and empowering me about women in educational leadership. On occasions, however, I have reflected on how I wish this awareness may have been available to me earlier in my teaching career, specifically during my initial teacher education course, rather than having to wait until my master's degree in educational management and leadership. In my current role as educational leadership lecturer at the Melbourne Graduate School of Education at the University of Melbourne, I have the privilege of imparting a number of subjects, some of which form part of our IT courses. 3 main reasons have convinced me that this is an optimal space for the conversation on women and educational leadership. Firstly, it's through the research and practice that I would be able to educate students on the realities of women leaders in education. Secondly, I could empower female students to start thinking about their own road to leadership. And thirdly, I could also be educating and including future male teachers and leaders to the discussion. This context has allowed me to work with our pre-service teachers and also given me the opportunity to share and discuss the impactful work of Women Ed around the world. So just how do female teacher candidates perceive themselves as future educational leaders? How do they perceive educational leadership roles? Do they indeed project themselves as such? And in doing so, what do they identify as barriers and enablers in formulating this perception? Through informal conversations with around 40 to 60 pre-service teachers this year, I was able to identify some of the underlying assumptions and experiences that informed their perceptions. I have called these barriers and enablers. On my slide, I represent the enablers as stepping stones on the road to leadership and the gap between them as barriers. On my slide, I represent, within each group, these surfaced as practices, behaviours, and also people, most of which I suspect will not be unknown to you, irrespective of your context. When it came to barriers, in particular, 4 stood out: perception of self, the perception of the role, work-life balance, and the path to leadership. Whilst many of our student teachers acknowledge possessing positive attributes such as integrity, approachability, equity, and inclusion, pre-service teachers don't always perceive these as leadership traits beyond their future classrooms, despite recognising these in some of the women leaders they admire and with whom they have worked. In some isolated cases, there is still the belief that leaders are born and not made. To me, this is somewhat concerning, with direct implications for how we identify and develop talent within our schools once these university students become graduate teachers. The next barrier pertains to the perceptions of the roles, that of the principal or the head teacher in particular. As part of these conversations, it was not uncommon to hear the phrase, "Being a principal is just not for me." And there's the word "just" as well. It is understandable that leadership roles may seem unattainable at this stage of their early trajectories. However, I would prefer the phrase, "It's not for me at the moment," as I believe that this acknowledges that teachers evolve, improve, and indeed can develop the necessary skills to become successful educational leaders if this is their choice. Linked to this perception of the role surfaced an undeniable conviction that a role of this nature is not always life-friendly, or family-friendly. This was particularly palpable from younger pre-service teacher and highlights the tangible challenges and struggles women in leadership face on a regular basis and how they impact pre-service and graduate teachers. The last of these barriers that I would like to point out is one of the path of leadership. During discussions, there was a concerted understanding that the road is long and too distant to even think about it. In fact, it was only last week that we were learning from Yamina Bibi about how leadership is not linear. Stepping stones are tricky, they're not fixed. They wobble and require a strong sense of balance, but the option of taking a leap is likely to be risky and met with adversity and unnecessary disappointment. So they are worth. In terms of enablers, just as barriers emerged from discussions, so did a positive side of it. Interestingly, whilst barriers were often identified as in terms of perceptions, enablers were identified as individuals or group of individuals. 3 enablers stood out, which I have labeled advocates, women in education as educational leaders, and networks. Advocates were characterised as individuals close to pre-service teachers who encouraged them to take risks, who reminded them of their achievements and positive attributes. These were often family members, close friends, and work colleagues, and they acted in more informal than rather formal ways. The second group of individuals included specifically women in educational leadership roles. These women, personally known to our students or not, embodied a much needed visibility and representation of women in educational leadership roles. These included head teachers, teacher leaders, and women academics and lecturers. As opposed to advocates, women educational leaders, simply by being in these roles, acted as enablers by preparing the path for future educational leaders. Finally, it was the presence of networks specifically aimed at accompanying, supporting, and empowering future leaders that encouraged pre-service teachers to the possibility of pursuing a leadership role in the future. Networks such as our very own WomenEd are perceived as important scaffolds towards leadership. These reflections and anecdotes from these interactions, to me, raise a question in particular. How early is too early in our development of female educators as future educational leaders, or how late is too late in letting these opportunities pass by? As part of this exercise, a number of students expressed feeling equipped with the knowledge and confident to begin considering a leadership role when presented with the opportunity in the future. In addition, pre-service teachers reflected on having a greater interest in being able to recognise opportunities for leadership, learning how to overcome initial organisational and systemic barriers, and to dismiss early misguided assumptions about a career in middle or principal leadership. These reflections shared with you today could be considered as an example where early intervention can prove fruitful and necessary towards educating and empowering women teacher candidates to start thinking about their leadership path. This is an approach that should be considered and taken up by faculties of education, for we know that the challenges faced by women leaders today are global, transcending boundaries of place, language, ethnicity, and culture. Empirical research to investigate this topic is needed if we are to advance the role of women leaders in education to one that is more transformative and sustained over time. This exercise has also convinced me more than ever that it is never too early to begin the process, and that adding more enablers to reduce the presence of barriers is possible. And yes, the road might be very long and bumpy and non-linear, but it can also be supported, enriching, and above all, necessary to arrive at leadership better prepared. Becoming in anything should be a balanced and well-paced process of growth and reflection. If the growth is too quick, we run the risk of little reflection to fully understand what it all means. And if the growth is too slow, we may find ourselves unprepared when the opportunity to lead is placed before us. So I'd like to share with you, just before I finish, by framing this presentation with a Chinese story, which I'm sure you have heard before, but which I think frames very well this presentation. So Chinese bamboo, when you plant it, nothing happens in the first year, nor in the second year, or the third, or the fourth years. You don't even see a single green shoot. And yet in the fifth year, in a space of just 6 weeks, the bamboo will grow 9 feet high. The question is, did it grow 9 feet in 6 weeks? Or in fact, in the 5 years? If the tree had not developed a strong foundation, it may not have sustained its life as it grew. So to any pre-service teacher listening today, and to graduate and early career teachers, as you prepare to lead in your future classrooms, identify your advocates, identify the women leaders in your educational settings that influence and inspire you, and take advantage of the learning and support offered to you by networks such as Women Ed. Don't wait to have a leadership title in order to begin developing your leadership. Your name is your title. In fact, it should remain your most important title throughout your leadership path. Thank you.
That was absolutely fantastic, Bernie. Thank you so much for that session. I was just putting a message in actually into the chat, which is why I was delayed, about how that last point about your name being your title is 100% that, because we so often we're searching for, you know, the big title, the big boss or whatever, you know, your name on the door of the office, and yet actually we are ourselves. We turn up as ourselves, right?
Absolutely, and I think we have to shift a little bit the way we think about leadership in that sense. You know, that it's attached to a title, that it's attached to a name on a door and things like that. And I think I've reflected already this morning so much from the 2 earlier presentations about the importance of who you are, and Atia was talking to us about that. And so I've had a lot of leadership roles, and I've also had to use my name and to remind myself every day that that is also part of my own leadership, and I carry that with me everywhere I go. And sometimes it becomes even stronger when your name is a foreign name, as it is for me. I'm Chilean. I come from Chile. I've been living in Australia for 30 years, but this is who I am. And so I think it's important, particularly as I focus my research in you know, with this particular research that I'm doing on pre-service teachers, that they see that as part of their leadership. They already have leadership as they're starting their leadership role towards something bigger, I guess.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I thought you're Chilean, so we have got South America represented. Woo!
You could say that.
We are global. Oh, thank you so much. That really was. I mean, the bit that I particularly thought for me, how when we're putting together the programs and thinking about which talks kind of work, obviously we have to put you at a specific time because you're coming at us from like.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but even so, just the nature of how these 3 talks have just fit together so well, it's just been wonderful.
Very good planning. Very
well.
Good
I don't. It was purely it was unintentional but it was just so nice to see how they all kind of connected so well, and some of the messages that, you know, these common messages. I hope everyone leaves today's session thinking, I am not going to use the word just again. And if we can do that,
absolutely, yeah, and we do it all the time.
Completely.
Exactly.
And so now I'm just going to move on. No.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Bernie. And now we're moving on to our next session. And I was just saying, we've had a mouse joining us this morning. We've got Jill Berry, who hopefully will join us a bit later on the screen, because it is the 7th of 7 unconferences that she has attended. So big shout out to Jill for that, which is quite a record, really. And of course, she is one of our founding. I think she was Saint Jill last year that we termed her, because she has been with us right from the start. Okay, moving on now to Women Ed Spain. And we have 3 presenters with us this morning who are going to be talking about how they demonstrate their beliefs through their behaviours. We've got Mercedes, Gaia and Sonia, who are going to be talking about their experiences within Women-Led Spain. So I'm going to hand over to you lovely ladies now. Good morning all.
Good morning from Spain, everybody.
Buenos dias, I should say.
Buenos
Buenos
dias.
dias. I'm hoping that my colleagues are here. It's Sonia and Gaia. We are delighted that our proposal to share experiences from Spain was accepted. And we are doing a Three Musketeer act. The fact that we were grouped and placed in this particular session, which is about owning our bravery, I think was inspiring for us as well, because having put together a title linking our beliefs to our values and our behavior, so how we are as people, how we are as colleagues, as professionals within education, it was crucial to us that we were able to own that bravery and see ourselves through other colleagues, other friends' eyes as brave, even if we didn't think of ourselves as brave. So today we want to share our stories, and we want to tell you a little bit about the path that we have followed through our professional lives, that we hope in that sharing we'll be able to create a sense of community, and also to bring something to those who are listening. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague.
So thank you so much, Mercedes. It's really a pleasure, not just to be here, but just to have a chance to have a lot of conversation, both with Gaia and Mercedes. When we kind of think of what we want to share with you today, we thought that we should introduce ourselves and kind of in a way show you how from a very early age, we were trying to take the right route, to be brave, to show our commitment to our values, to make a difference to the way we teach, to have an impact on the children we teach. So in a way, even on a very early age, children, and that's, I think it's very important from where we are and our starting point, need to be encouraged by us in the teaching operation, in the schools, to be brave, to stand up, and to really believe in themselves, which I think it's the most important part of it. So what we are trying to start in Spain at the moment is a network. So here you have just 3 of us, but we hope that in a year's time, we have so many pictures on the screen that they just do not fit, because this will mean that a lot of colleagues across Spain are joining our networks, are kind of sharing their ideas they have with us, and that we can definitely kind of going and building up a much wider and bigger community. So as said, here we are ready to go today.
Thank you, Sonia. And I just want to echo that I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm learning a lot already from all the sessions. So you saw a photograph of me in the last slide. In this photo, I was 8 years old and I was balancing on my bike and driving forward. And if anyone was to ask me, I was a very happy child. I was bright and discovering the world around me. But when I think back, it was actually quite a difficult stage. My parents had just split up, and my mum had 2 nursery schools that she was managing herself and didn't have much time. And at school, I was becoming acutely aware of the fact that I was reading much at a really slower rate than my peers. But I decided at that very young age to hide behind a shield of courage and humor. And I thought that shield would just be unbreakable. And I went on to join the British Council at quite an early stage. I was about 20 years old. And I decided not to tell anyone about my dyslexia, because I thought, you know, being dyslexic and an English teacher wasn't going to quite fit the bill.
And I also thought that it was important to hide my multi-ethnic background because I didn't think that was going to support me in fitting in with the British Council either. So a lot changed. I began receiving a lot of students with special educational needs, and I began to recognize also in my class, in my role as a teacher, the need to talk about my identity and to share cultural history of the UK. And I started reading about special educational needs and designing material to springboard conversations in the classroom about identity and culture. And the response I got from my students was just incredible. They shared with me the coping mechanisms that they were developing. And they also shared with me the fact that they also had quite complex identities. I was working in the Basque Country and then moved to Barcelona in Catalonia, where the identity is not necessarily always Spanish. So there's so lots of the students were coming forward and engaging in conversations about identity and how they felt in this kind of political or cultural questions that were presented by their context. And these conversations did nothing but inspire me. And it was obvious to me that if I could build self-esteem, I could facilitate their learning further. And yet in the staff room, I was still code switching. I was still hiding my dyslexia. I did not think that being myself would really open new career pathways or serve me in any way. And I then went on a short stint and did some teacher training. And I saw that the culture around teaching had changed quite a lot. So the trainees were coming forward with their own learning differences and their own cultural backgrounds and sharing them really openly. And I just thought, wow, the secrets I've been holding are so irrelevant. How have I got to this stage? And I began to acknowledge that not being open was holding me back personally and professionally. And sharing my dyslexia and my background and allowing me to bring my whole person to work became somewhat of a mission. And I committed myself to doing this, not just through words, but through actions to support myself and give me the confidence to do it. So I signed up to do a master's in special educational needs. And in that one step, I suddenly started to see new pathways opening up around me. And during this quite sort of difficult but important process, I found out I was pregnant. And I had an interview to become an academic manager. And I was totally nervous, of course, and on the phone, nobody could see me. And I decided that it was one opportunity to sort of present myself fully in the interview. And so I had a lot to share. I told them about the fact that I was pregnant, that I was 8 months pregnant. I told them that I was dyslexic, and I told them about the projects I had been doing on diversity in the classroom and how they had come about. And I brought my whole self to the interview, and the results were really convincing. I did not only just get the job, but I began to see opportunities around me were just sort of multiplying. I developed really meaningful relationships at work, and I was invited to talk about my learning differences and supporting others in the classroom. I interviewed for the role of being an equality, diversity and inclusion coordinator, and then went on to become the special educational needs coordinator for Spain, and working always alongside Sonia, who joins us on the call. And I've just learned so much in this process. So my commitment to myself and others and my openness has led me to recognize opportunities that I didn't know existed, and it's enabled me to bring myself fully to my work. And in doing this, I've maintained my balance and direction, and I continue to drive forward with clarity and integrity. Thank you for listening. This is just one of the values related that we have at the British Council, and Sonia is now going to move on to talking about how we integrate how our expert and inclusive values into our.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing this, Gaia. I have to say that it has been an absolute pleasure to work with you over the last years. I definitely thought that you are really showing what for me it means to be also expert and inclusive, because I know by sure that you have a huge and vast experience in special educational needs, but you are also inclusive in the sense, and that's really the point I want to make, that you listen to others and that you make them feel part of their story. And that's probably what I want to represent today myself. Because in a way, what we are doing at the moment is to try to keep the person in the center. We are trying to support quite often. So it's about child participation. It's about making sure that children with special educational needs are supported. It's about to make sure that people in the staff room feel that they can contribute. It's about mainstreaming our values in what we do. And this is where I think the role of being an expert and being inclusive is truly and important. Why? Because in a way, what we're trying to do always is to show and guide others. Because some of us may have more specific knowledge, like in my case, for example, it's I'm kind of working in the role of a psychologist sometimes, in the role of the safeguarding lead, or in the role of the expert on EDI. And I may have more information to share. I may know more procedures. I may know a lot of things. But the impact of my work is definitely on each individual, and each individual has to be included in our work and our commitment. So, for example, when we speak about safeguarding children, it's also about listening to their voice and how they want to be protected and feel safe. If it's about our sharing our EDI values, it's also about how people want to mainstream these values in all what we do. So one of the things I've learned over the last years is that quite often I'm seen as the expert who knows a lot of things, but I really love and benefit from listening to the experience of everybody else and to include them in the actions we plan and do. So probably I was very happy when we kind of were preparing these slides, because I definitely thought that Mercedes was suggesting for me to do it. And it was just very, very nice, because I thought exactly that's what I truly would like to be: expert, because I may know some things that children, staff members, or families do not know, but definitely in an inclusive way, creating safe spaces where all of us have a right to be heard to. And Mercedes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sonia and Gaia. Often when you work in education, you find yourself that every school has a vision for the students, and some key words that describe the behaviors and the approaches. When we were doing this presentation, we decided to focus on what are the British Council's vision and aim, and reflect on how we have, through different paths, arrived at the British Council, because we really believe in those values. So when we were distributing them, I chose the values of optimistic and bold, and I hope that through a number of experiences in my own life, I can provide examples of where I have been bold and taken decisions that maybe were not the safest, and where I have approached the challenges ahead of me in a positive way, looking for the best outcome, and giving examples through my own personal and professional life. Because at the end of the day, we work in schools and we work in education and we work with young people, but we are human beings that have beliefs, and bring those to the table and to our workplaces and to the relationships that we build with our colleagues, with the families, and with the children. So my own background is maybe not as straightforward as some people may think. I was born in northern Spain in a mining village of Spanish and Roma heritage. I dropped out of education at age 16 and started working in retail, but had a yearning for doing other things, and went back to school, and surprised a number of people in my family and in my neighborhood by deciding to go to university. And I found a defendant and an ally in a very unusual place. It was my grandmother who encouraged me to seek to be and not be afraid of being the first to go to university. I had some limitations and I had some decisions to make along the way. So going to university was a big decision for me. And I wanted to be a journalist. That was my dream. I wanted to travel the world and write stories and be part of exciting developments. But that was not to be. I had to stay at the local university because that was just one of the things that I couldn't change. But studying languages opened a whole world of opportunities for me. It's a decision that I will never be grateful enough to have made, because it allowed me to travel. It allowed me to go to the UK, where I reinvented myself and discovered a passion for education, which I hadn't thought that it was something that I would do. And through the contacts, through the schools where I worked at, through the colleagues that I have met, I have developed over time, and now on the wrong side of 50, I've developed over time more confidence in myself. I have found like-minded people and supportive people, encouraging people, learned a lot from teamwork, from networks, and I know those have been mentioned a number of times today and yesterday, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to find those allies and those people who build up your own confidence, that help you see the things that maybe you don't see in yourself, and push you to be bold and to do things that haven't been done before and to be creative. That self-belief in a professional environment does have a knock-on effect in your own personal beliefs and in the power of education, not just in educating young people, but in educating ourselves through our journey. It is never too late to learn. It is never too late to reflect on who you are and who you want to be, and how you influence those around you and shape the world as a consequence. So it's been a real privilege, for example, in the last couple of days, listening to people, listening to their stories, listening to the findings from research, as well as to the very human experiences of what it is to be a woman in the education setting, and how we can learn hugely from those experiences, and what role we all have to take in helping young generations learn from our mistakes, but also help them recognize, as we do ourselves, to recognize their successes and our progress. So it's been great to be part of this network. It's been great working with my colleagues, and it is really an honor to be part of Women Ed and the first steps of Women Ed Spain. So thank you very much.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Gaia, Sonia and Mercedes. That was really wonderful to hear. It was like amazing to think how privileged you are to be able to shape the values of an organization. That's a real powerful thing, isn't it?
It is.
Because you can kind of really mold it in the direction you want it to go, and reflect you as a leader. How do you explore those conversations within your organization?
I think there are a number of sort of formal settings where when the values were being formulated, and it was a sort of it took months to get to a point. I mean, you think of global organizations over 100 countries. How do you distill what are the key things that we all have in common and that are a compass through the way we do our work in our communities. So there were a lot of conversations, and through those conversations, in the end, we had to pin down what were the three pairs, because we've done it as pairs of concepts. And one is a state of being, and the other one is almost like a disruptor. So you are not just static, you are in constant evolution. So to have that balance and to keep talking about those. So now that we have them, and we have them in writing, and they are banded around, we have them in our signatures. So if you forget, it's never too far from you. Now, when we do things, we ask ourselves, is this in line with our values? Am I being optimistic? Am I being bold? Or am I being inclusive? And if the answer is no, then you need to stop what you're doing and you need to change it so that you are true to who you say you are.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it? So often values are things, is it Mary Myatt who said that values should be lived, not laminated? And that whole idea of reflecting, so my husband's just bought me a cup of tea, the whole reflection around that, and actually asking yourself. It's a bit like sometimes in schools when we say, are we doing this for the children, or are we doing it for ourselves? And it's that same kind of reflection, isn't it, to think about your values in the same way. So Mercedes, you never made it as a journalist, but
never. But look at me now.
Look at you now.
I'm talking to loads of people. I'm communicating, and I have friends from all over the world. We've just been listening to somebody from Australia. So maybe I have made it, though in a different way.
Yes, that's just what I was thinking. And then, of course, every day is different, isn't it, in your job? So I imagine it's probably adding just as much excitement, if not the travel. But you're an international educator, so you get the travel. We have, thank you again for your session. There was one thing I picked up from what Gaia was saying at the start there, actually, about kind of what she said. She said that there was that powerful admission of not being open, holding you back. And for me, that again, that kind of resonated with everything else that's been discussed this morning, and how sometimes we need to kind of almost own our past, own where we've come from, and own what we are, and not be ashamed of it, not apologize for that.
I mean, there was a lot of opportunity waiting for me, and I didn't notice or see it because I was perhaps veiled by this idea that it wasn't going to help me. But I actually found out the complete opposite by bringing my whole self. I actually realized that there were all these people and opportunities to share and to grow. And I don't think I would have seen them if I had remained behind this sort of shield and this perception that I had. And it was completely not real. I mean, I've worked now at the British Council since I was 22, I'm 37. And since I've come to this realization, it's just being constantly reinforced that there are opportunities to talk, to share, to learn, to develop. I mean, we have also a group called the Ethnically Diverse Group that has grown since COVID. We have groups talking communities of practice on gender. There are so many avenues to go down, and I just would not have seen them if I hadn't sort of shared my whole self with everyone.
You really were owning your bravery, weren't you?
Yeah.
I think, and I do think that we do. So many of us do hide behind. Actually, is it Brené Brown? Isn't it? She talks about our armor, the armor that we hide behind, and that's what it sounds like here. Sometimes that kind of creates a filter, blocks us from seeing things that could, like you say, give you all of those open opportunities and those experiences. So how's Women Ed Spain going? I'm intrigued to know how the network's progressing. Are you doing really well? It's such a
we are planning events, and we are now branching out and having 2 centres in Spain. So one in Madrid and one in Barcelona, from where to reach even more women educators and leaders and potential leaders and girls. We want to do it all.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. So really growing. And have you got separate Twitter handles for each of your different branches, or?
No, we are one. We may be in 2 locations, but we are one.
You are one. Excellent. Well, that's fantastic. And have you suffered a little bit? Because I know that other networks have found it really difficult with COVID and trying to connect. Have you felt that that's been impacting you at all?
I guess the physical, face-to-face connection has been a challenge, but we've shown our values and our commitment to keep on building up, and we hope that as things are getting back to kind of normality in Spain, that we'll be able to have physical events, and we'll be able to do more of the sharing and connecting to each other.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Women Spain. Muchas gracias. And we hope to see you at our next unconference soon. Okay, so we are moving on now to our next guest. And we were a bit worried because we didn't think she was going to arrive. But Harin has arrived, which is wonderful. And this actually is really quite a special moment, because we have someone representing Africa today, which is fantastic. So Harin Otieno Menya has come from Rwanda, or rather is from Rwanda. She is a Pan-African educationalist, director of teacher training at the African Institute of Mathematics. And she is based in Rwanda, as I said, passionate about inspiring African teachers, African leaders, African women to step into those roles and be much more visible. So Harin, are you here? I can see your name, but I can't see your face yet. So I'm hoping you can switch your camera on. That would be great, and your mic. Hey, hello. Lovely to have you with us this morning.
Hi everybody, and sorry for the panic, creating the panic, and I've actually literally ran out of a meeting I was having with district education leaders, and I had to. My colleagues kept telling me it's just. No, they were keeping time, taking time for me. So
I'll let you get on.
Really happy
Okay.
to be here. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I take it up from here. This is my first Women Ed meeting, so basically it's a learning session for me. And yes, I was able to join in yesterday briefly. I listened to the presentation by Kay, if I got her name right, and it was very inspiring. She was talking about feminism, and she asked a question about who amongst us, own the identity of being a feminist. I didn't respond. I didn't say yes or no, because I think I was left reflecting about that. It's not something that I've really delved into, but there was a conversation about that yesterday, about the fact that sometimes there's been a negative connotation around it. But just to say, I'm really, really excited to be here. I bumped on Women Ed on Twitter, and I think some tweets that were sent out. And what really caught my eye was the fact that, just looking at being able to connect to a group of women in education who are passionate not just about education, but also passionate about inspiring and supporting one another and inspiring fellow women to rise into those leadership positions. And over time, I have spent time just I would say discreetly looking at some of the posts, and many times I've been left nodding. In other words, I found a lot of the conversations, a lot of the shared insights really resonating with my own experience as a woman in education. So as has been put forward, I'm currently based in Rwanda, and I am Kenyan, currently based in Rwanda, and I've been in Rwanda for the last 4 years, almost 4 years. I was here in 2018. I came into Rwanda straight from my PhD. I had not even finished. It was my last year in 2018. I was doing my PhD as a Commonwealth scholar in the UK at Sheffield Hallam University. And then I came into African Institute for Mathematical Sciences just a few months before I could go in for my Viva. So it's been quite a ride. And I think when I was thinking about the title to my presentation, where I talked about stepping out of the shadows and looking at the trials that came out of that, and the tribulation, and the triumphs that also have come with that. And I was asking myself recently, where would I start with that conversation? I mean, I could start way, way back. I was trained as a mathematician, as a statistician. I didn't think I was going to step into education, even though I come from a family that is made of educationists. My mother was a teacher, a head teacher, and even now she's retired and she's still a teacher. I think her life revolves around teaching. Anytime she doesn't go to school, she'll say she's unwell. So she has to continue teaching even post her retirement. It keeps her going. So, so even as I got into my undergraduate and postgraduate, there was a sense that I was asked by my parents, what's this Bachelor of Science you're going to do? Why don't you just become a teacher? But then I said, no, I just want to do maths. But then my mother, I think being very prophetic, said, you know, you will go around and finally come back to education. And here I am today. The rest is history. So I'm thinking about stepping out of the shadows. And just to say that part of what I also find very interesting is that this is a place to just reflect on our own experiences as we learn from each other's experiences. As I mentioned in one of the latest tweets, one of my greatest aspirations in connecting with Women Ed is to hopefully learn from the process and hopefully discover the pathway through which we can create versions of Women Ed in Africa. I think part of my challenge is that I find it very difficult to identify with any particular country in the continent. I am Kenyan, I love my country, I'm Rwanda, I love what I'm doing here, but my general identity is the continent. And so I'm always keen to see what we can do to rally and to get education conversation that are Pan-Africanist in nature, that allows us to collaborate and to connect. And I think the people who really would benefit from that are the women in education, because I guess we have less opportunity for networking and collaborating culturally. And so it takes some deliberateness to allow for that sense of networking and creating a voice that can actually join into the conversation and break through some of the barriers that have been placed over time because of our hierarchical and what you might call patriarchal culture. So I'm going to share my screen just very briefly. I think if I have it, I think I wanted to share something about, yeah, here it is. So a little bit of what are the education spaces I'm currently functioning in. And I hope my screen is, you can see my screen. I just picked out a few photos and they are very, I was thinking about our taglines, disrupt, innovate, and change. And I think I thrive very much in the space of, I would say disruption, but I think I had never thought about that. I always say that I thrive in defying the status quo, always going against the grain. I am most alive when it is challenging, when it looks impossible, then I feel it's something to engage in. But over time, I just captured a few photos that would perhaps represent some of the avenues that I'm currently, I would say, engaging in terms of education in the continent, and a little bit of what it has taken to step into these spaces. I think that is going to be the thrust of my presentation. And then I'm just going to sit back. I guess what I would really like to hear is perhaps just have conversations with all of us and get insights and perhaps quote unquote constructive advice on what it would actually take to help mobilize fellow women and work together in a more structured way as women in education. So you can see a few photos there. All these photos are connected to education. That's the thread. So the two photos in the middle were actually the photo in the garden that was taken yesterday. As I said, I'm currently somewhere training around 300 teachers out of the city. And we were in training from Monday to Thursday. And then yesterday we decided to take a small break and then we were to continue today with a smaller group and with another group. So yesterday I was able to persuade my team, and it didn't take a lot of energy to persuade them, that as we were taking break, we could go in and do some community work. So every day as I was driven from my hotel to the site, I always saw women working their farms every day. And so I told my teachers, some of my core teachers, that it would be nice to, on our break, on our day, to actually go into the garden and help join the women who are tilling from morning to evening and just support them in helping them till. So that picture, I'm actually in the red t-shirt. We spent, I think, 2 hours yesterday tilling land alongside the women who till land, and we were doing this with the teachers. And just to say that it's a very normal activity, but it's also a very disruptive activity. Very disruptive, especially in the context of culture. One, culturally, there's this sense of, oh, you are a doctor and all that, you know. Ideally, most people would keep their space and all that. So one of the things that I know I have brought in the education space is the disruption of just doing away with all those power differences and just normalizing and making our teachers and stakeholders see that the fact that one has a higher level of education does not mean they need to disconnect from each other or from the other members of the community. And that has really been helpful, because in the process of that toned down kind of engagement and looking for activities outside the usual training like this one, where now we are just digging. And one of the things that is really good about Rwanda is that people tend to sing a lot. So we were digging and singing and working with the villagers. And more importantly, it created an opportunity to connect. And a number of the teachers who are here with us, who are some of my leading teachers in the training program that I've mentored, I would say informally for the last 3 years, were women. And at the end of it, you'll see the other photo next to it is actual contrast, where after that, I actually took them to my hotel and we had a great time in the hotel, just them relaxing and sitting by the pool. Again, another one-off experience. So this looked like very simple experiences, but one of the things that I've learned out of them, it is out of such experiences, if you're going to create a network of women, if you're going to create a space to nurture and inspire women, and I've had a few teachers come forward actually in a more deliberate way and say, I want you to be my mentor. I'm actually looking at you, the way you're doing stuff. We really look up at you, because in the education space, most of the people who work with us tend to come from a top-down approach, but you so much come down to our level, quote unquote, and we really feel we are connected with you. So in thinking about this, the next thing then for me is, if you're talking about women ed, for example, how do we galvanize this? How would we learn from this? Because I think for us, I guess from the African culture, the entry point is at the heart. You know, you create a heart connection, you get to identify with the realities, and then you create a space that can help to nurture, grow together and learn from one another. And then on the other side, you can see me standing. Yes, those were the 300 teachers. It was almost like assembly starting the session off, because the numbers were so many. So we had to have speakers and we had to engage with the teachers. But the thing is that the same spirit of community and connection is what I have built in the last 4 years. And it has taken a lot of fight, because even from the formal level, it's been a top down. Everything comes from, quote unquote, the ministry down to this level, and then you have somebody coming from outside to work, to train the teachers. But then I came in and said, I want a bottom up. I removed all my so-called master trainers that were supposed to be from universities and all that. And I said, I want to listen to the teachers. There's no curriculum. I want to engage with the teachers. I want them to identify where they need the needs. I want them to identify amongst themselves who have some form of capacity in those areas, and then we work alongside them. Now, when I was writing this and I was thinking about the tribulations, I remember the many times I actually have had to shed tears, because you're working against, quote unquote, going against the whole system in terms of everybody else is working top down and you're trying to work bottom up. And it's just going against the expectations of some of the very high level positions. I've had situations where in the first few times, letters were written to my boss to say, Helen needs to be removed from this position because I think she's not too obedient to the system. She's doing things in a different way. But on the other hand, they would say, but she seems to really understand what she's doing, but it's only that she's going against the grain. And what I've learned over time, there are moments that I felt like, this is too much. And especially being a woman working in a space that is dominated by men, working in a culture that generally women are not supposed to be able to speak out and go a different direction. And then working in a country that is not your country. So sometimes I've been asked, why do you think you care, you want to position yourself to care more about our teachers than ourselves? But I've had to learn that I have to hold in there, and over time, the results have spoken to themselves. I can see it's almost time. So I'm going to just mention the other thing over time was how to step out of the Rwandan context where I've really thrived and now step into the continental space. I thought I would do that through the institution. It wasn't working through the institution. And so I had to rebrand myself on Twitter beginning this year and begin speaking from an African platform. And that has taken some building, and it took some fighting some imposter syndrome. I had to give myself a label. Those of us who've seen me on Twitter, I call myself Africa's own education doctor and education evangelist. That was really deliberate because I wanted to signal that my call or my purpose, sense of purpose, is a continent. So since then, of course, one of the things I've also loved is just being able to connect to entities and being brave enough to connect to entities out of my context, like now Women Ed. And I've recently also stepped into a space of being a radio host. And that also is really helping me connect across the continent. And I'm looking at how can I draw on all this and hopefully help create a structure for women in education. So I'm going to stop there so that perhaps I can allow for questions, conversations. I need to keep my eye on the chat to see if there's, yes, so I can see Emily is just encouraging me the aspect of the imposter syndrome. That's been big time and at all the different levels. But I'm really glad that through looking at what other people are doing, Twitter is a powerful space for me. And I really appreciate the opportunity to interact with all of us. And I'm actually just here to learn because I'm really keen to see what it means to have a Women Ed and what that would look like in our continent. I believe there's already something in North Africa. So I'll stop there and maybe ask if there is any comments, question, or feedback. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Haireen. So there were lots of messages in the chat. Yes. About I'm trying to think now. I need to go back a little bit. Mums are always right.
Yes, mums are always right. Say that again.
There was something about fighting that imposter syndrome and how they're really caught up in what you were saying. I thought it was really powerful when you said the point about how you're most comfortable when you're disrupting, that you don't like it when it's too easy, that you need that challenge. You know, can you explain a little bit more about what it is about that? Do you feel that you've really got to create that disruption, or that it comes your way anyway?
Yeah, I think the way I'm wired is that I always make a joke that unless it is really challenging, I am always propelled towards something that looks impossible. What people tend to think, this is impossible, this is not doable. And I think I always say in any job or assignment that I've done, as soon as it becomes really normal and usual and everything is just routine, then most of the time it's a signal for me to jump out. So I think I'm fairly comfortable in a place where there's challenge, and that has helped me, I believe, as a woman, because I've always found myself in spaces where I am not expected to speak, or what I'm talking about is not what everybody is thinking. And I think it's kept me going, even in moments when I felt like giving up. It's always like, but this is one more challenge to overcome. This is one more thing to build and to showcase that actually things could be different from what it is. So yeah, I think it's just something that has been wired in me. And I think my training in mathematics, being in classrooms where perhaps I was the only girl and everybody else was the other gender, I think also helped really make me be okay. And finally, maybe the last thing, now that you say moms are always okay. Part of my history is that I was thrown out of a mathematics class and told I could not do maths at a very early age. My mother, who is a teacher, was able to see through that and take me out of that school, a public school. And she took me to a private school that we could not afford. So she had to do extra work to get me going in that place. But I was the odd one out, walking 10 kilometers to school when everybody else is being driven to school in a limousine and all that. And I think that at a very early age, helped me be okay to be the odd one out and to be in a space where everybody else is different and you just don't belong, but you make it work. Yeah, so I think all those things may have contributed to that.
I mean, that that just shows how much resilience that helped you to build, though, over that time, your mum doing that, but also all of the sacrifices like your mum made as well to put you in that school. I mean, as we're going through all of the sessions over the weekend, you know, sometimes just before people are coming on, they're like, sorry, I'm just putting the children to bed, or sorry, my child's feeling unwell. Like it's literally just the story, and loads of people in the chats are saying the same thing. And it's, you know, all of the sacrifices that mums have made to even be part of these sessions, etc. are just, you know, inspiring stories. And actually, your mum most probably didn't even realize how much resilience you were going to have to put up by putting you in that school. The initial thought is, do you know what, let me put her somewhere where she's going to get the education she needs. And then all of those like lessons that you learned that were most probably unintentional, but actually have built you up to the woman now.
Yeah. And I think she also kind of embodied it, because we could see how hard she was working. She was teaching at primary school. She was selling vegetables at the market, and she included us. I mean, we would have to go carrying loads to take to the market. I would have to go to sell alongside her. But then being in this space where, you know, you're just the odd one out, you know, people come, as I said, they would go for lunch and tell you they took a nap. And then 5 minutes before school, they were woken up to come back to school. And you're thinking, I've had to run back and come back in the sun, but then still being respected, because one thing she did was not just take me to school, she trained me from then on, never like to be a self-regulated learner. And that was a topic of my PhD anyway. So I was able to thrive and be like the top of the class, despite being this odd one out. And I was just part of it. And I could see, because unfortunately, my dad lost his job at a very early time in our life. So it was my mom who actually had to work all these so many odd jobs. So I think, yes, being part of that process, seeing her be it and being part of it, I believe cultivated just that resilience, and seeing it in her up to now. As I said, she's still going on. She's retired, but she has a school and she's running the school. And it's like nothing stops her. If she thinks she needs to do it, it will be done ultimately. And I can see a question where Emily was asking, how do you respond to those who oppose your work? This is an interesting question, because I can say the last 3 years have been tough. And that's why I was saying triumphs and trials, because part of the kind of opposition have been at different levels. Part of what I had to do with the current project I'm doing, which was originally put together by a multilateral organization that was then, and that's a challenge in Africa. Sometimes the ideas are concocted outside the continent, and then they're brought to the continent with some goodies attached to it. And so sometimes our leaders kind of have no choice but to embrace it. So when I came in and I was given a project that I didn't believe needed to be the way it was, it took a lot of engagement. And how did we? So part of how I dealt with the opposition, I think, has been twofold, and I've been learning over time. There are times I've learned on how to be diplomatic, how to be able to say what I think, but still sound like I'm being submissive, but still voice what I'm saying. There are times that I've been outright and say, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. But also what has really helped me is just being quote unquote deep, understanding my field, so that I'm not just talking air. I'm backing what I'm saying with reasoning. I mean, there was a time I had to face a whole department at a university who was backing part of what I'm doing, and I thought it was outrightly wrong. And when I went into that conversation, there was like, oh, you were not there when we were putting it on, you've just come, this is what you have to do. And I said, look, we owe it to our country, to our nation, to our continent to do the right thing. So let's forget about our positions. Let's talk as academicians. Let's go back to literature. Let's build out the evidence. Tell me the literature you've read that actually backs what you're saying. And I'll tell you why I'm saying what I'm saying. And because really they hadn't done anything and it was an all-man club, I was able to then articulate, this is what research says, this is what research says, this is what research says. And then it's like, oh, but you know, that's why we are experimenting. And that's part of the challenge we have in Africa. We have too many people coming to experiment on us. And so I said, look, even in medicine, you can't inject a mice with medicine that has not shown some level of efficacy. So you can't be having our teachers just being quote unquote injected with anything because we want to experiment. So there have been different ways I've dealt with opposition, and I think it has worked. What has finally worked is the results. That what is coming out, what the one advantage I had was that I had the resources to implement what I needed to implement. And over time, the results started speaking for themselves.
That's brilliant.
That's all
Thank
been
you.
easy.
Thank you, Hareen. That was absolutely fantastic. And big shout out to all mothers, actually, because I think so many of us just wouldn't even be here, would we, without their hard work and their backing and their
Big
inspiration.
shout out to all the mothers, yes.
Sure. So thank you. A brilliant presentation. Lots of real thoughtful stuff there. And again, lots of comments in the chat box, Hareen, that you may want to pick up on after this. But thank you so much for presenting this morning. It's a real honour to have you with us. Thank you. So we're roughly on track still. So hopefully we can continue with that. And we have our final speaker for the morning. We've got the panel discussion, which is after that.
Palm, I can't hear you.
Sorry, have I been muted the entire time? So she's, member of the MTPT project, which always throws me. Spent 10 years working in UK and internationally as an English teacher and lead practitioner, and now is qualifying as a coach. So Emma, over to you, I think.
Good morning, Palm. Thank you for that introduction. Good to hear that you can hear me okay and can see me okay. So thanks for getting around the tongue twister of the MTPT project. We have kept it despite its tongue twister. It stands for the Maternity Teacher Paternity Teacher Project, and we keep the name because it does exactly what it says on the tin. So we're a UK charity founded in 2016 when I had my son Hugo. I've got two children now. They're 5 and 3.5. And what we do is we inspire, empower and connect teachers choosing to complete professional development during the parental leave period as a way of connecting with their own sense of identity and intellectual curiosity whilst they are raising their babies, but also as a way of addressing the motherhood penalty in education. Right now, we're the UK's only charity for parent teachers, and finding again and again that whilst there are lots of organisations that are working around the women's space, we are the only organisation who are looking specifically at this period of pregnancy, maternity and return to work. So one of the enormous things that we've been doing since 2018, well, a little bit earlier than that in terms of the literature review, is trying to find the research that actually provides evidence for the motherhood penalty in education. Anecdotally, we all know it exists, and it exists cross-sector, but we don't actually have any evidence to suggest what impact the motherhood penalty is having on the education sector. Now, back in 2017, when I was just finishing my leave with Hugo, I stumbled across this Policy First report, which told us that according to the school's workforce statistics data, women aged 30 to 39 were the largest demographic leaving teaching every year. And for anybody who is well versed in women ed, that's a familiar statistic and one that gets trotted out quite regularly as an attrition rate. But what we assume, and what Jonathan Simons in the Policy Exchange report assumed, was that this had something to do with the maternity period or maternity leave. But we don't actually have any evidence beyond this first figure that connection is real. So we started looking at what exactly it was that made women aged 30 to 39 leave teaching and what it is that enables them to stay. We started that research in 2018, and this is actually the first exclusive time that we've presented some of the headlines of that research. So really glad that we're able to do that at a Women Ed event and give Women Ed audiences first dibs and first insight into some of these findings. So before I sort of share some of the things that we found out and how we went about things, It struck me as I was creating these slides that this has been such a huge community effort. And whilst I've been the driving force behind it, looking at the literature and looking at how we can go about doing this research, we can see all the names there that I just like to say a huge thank you to for being part of this research and for enabling this research to happen, either by conducting interviews, telling me how to do research, or transcribing the 80 interviews that we eventually managed to get together. So before we undertook our own research, so 2016 to 2017 involved a lot of reading, a lot of literature review, and it resulted in this infographic that if you follow us on the MTPT project, you might be quite familiar with. It starts in the top left-hand corner, if you're looking at your screen, with that 76% of teachers are women. And it goes all the way around in a clockwise motion to the only 60% of these female head teachers are mothers. So that gives you an idea of the career progression of a woman in teaching if motherhood is part of their personal journey. And some of those statistics we didn't know until 2018, when I presented to the DFE on the motherhood penalty in education with my 3-week-old Lucy attached to me, and squeezed a few more accurate statistics out of them, more accurate than some of the research we'd done. So before 2018, we didn't know that 3.4% of the teacher workforce are on maternity leave at any given time. So that means that if you are working in a school in the UK, it's highly likely that 2 women around about that average number are on maternity leave at that moment. And so that gives us a little bit of an insight about how many women the MTPT project are working with, and how many women every year are undergoing this experience of maternity leave, return to work, and how many maybe of these women are getting to age 30 to 39 with young families and thinking, maybe this is not for me anymore. We know that if we do lose them, that bottom right-hand statistic, if we do lose mothers or these women aged 30 to 39, they're not all mothers, more than half of them who go away to look after families don't actually come back again. So if we lose mothers to the motherhood penalty, we often don't manage to reintegrate them back into the workforce. So that's the sort of background, the context of the statistics that we did know before we undertook our research. And we use that as a jumping off platform to really explore a little bit more about this 27%, the largest demographic of teachers leaving every year other than retirees, and to understand a bit more about how much that had to do with whether these women were mothers or not. So in terms of our methodology, what we did between January and July 2018, we conducted 2 surveys. One was for female teachers who had left teaching aged 30 to 39, and the other one was for female teachers who were aged 30 to 39 who were still in the classroom. We didn't specifically ask for mother respondents because that's not what the statistic initially was telling us. It was just saying women aged 30 to 39, and as we all know, not everybody who is a woman who's 30 to 39 is a mother, wants to be a mother, or will be a mother. And that's really important that we don't fall down that stereotypical hole of assuming that everybody in that age bracket is a mother. In August 2018, we undertook 81 qualitative telephone interviews. So myself, Elaine and Helen conducted those over the phone. 37 of those were from women who had left teaching, and 44 were from women who were still teaching. And it's quite important to say here that I'm not a researcher. I think the highest qualification I have is a master's, which I I passed it, but I'm not a think tank. And part of the reason that we were doing this research is because nobody else was. And this demographic is very much an awkward demographic. People aren't sure what to do with mothers. So people don't do anything at all with them, and that is a real disservice to us because it means that we don't know anything about this audience, and so it's very easy to ignore if you don't know anything about them. So whilst we're not a research body, and neither Elaine, Helen or I or any of the people who were involved in the transcription process are researchers, that is a huge volume of data. We had 500 respondents from each of the initial surveys, so around 1,000 respondents each, and then 81 qualitative telephone interviews. So then between 2018 to 2020, we sort of tried to get to grips with these survey findings. I was working full time over that period, so capacity was limited. We transcribed the interviews with that huge transcription team. And now we're at the point where we are analysing those interviews and writing up some of the report findings. Now that I don't work full-time in education anymore, I am at liberty to do a few more things. I've left teaching, ironically, and one of the women aged 30 to 39 who have left. That's real irony for you. So here are the reasons that women stay in teaching. So you've got that little table there. The top reason, unsurprisingly, is finances, but then job satisfaction, professional commitment. So something like they feel like they have an obligation to their students, or they've committed to some sort of qualification, or they committed to a contract. But then interestingly, number 4 is childcare logistics that are compatible with their role, and then flexible and part-time arrangements, which will come as no surprise to us. And it's interesting, number 6 and number 7 as well, that the reason that women stay is because there are progression opportunities available to them. And also, rather depressingly, that they feel that they're unqualified for other industries. So it's sort of rock and a hard place there. So I suppose the questions for me, if I were still in school and thinking about school leadership there, is over this maternity and return to work period, and when your staff are becoming mothers, are you offering them and making sure that they're aware of all the financial incentives that they're entitled to? So we're thinking of things like kit days that are paid at an appropriate day rate, introducing them to tax-free childcare, flexible working that enables them to reduce their childcare costs, making sure that they're being paid for the full TLR. These are the sorts of things that we were hearing that women were really grateful for, and that had enabled them to stay in teaching in this age bracket. Things like making sure that they are accessing promotional opportunities, and that they know about how shared parental leave can up their wage during that maternity leave period. And also making sure that they feel confident asking to return to work on the first day of the holidays, for example, so that they're paid for the whole holidays. So as crass as it sometimes might sound, money does make a difference, and it seems to be the biggest difference to this age bracket here. Also, this idea of job satisfaction, my questions there are, how happy are your staff in their roles, and how do you know that they are happy? How do we measure the satisfaction, the job satisfaction of our staff? When do we ask our colleagues how satisfied they are? And what do we do if they turn around and say, actually, I'm not satisfied and I am really frustrated, or I feel like I'm stagnating? How do we motivate and empower those staff to be happy in their roles? And obviously a huge theme for Women Ed this year and in previous years has been this idea of flexible working. So what flexible working arrangements can we use to ensure that women aged 30 to 39 are able to stay in their roles and to progress through their roles? So not just flexible working as a retention measure, but also as a progression opportunity as well, all the way up to headship and executive headship levels. So we looked specifically at how much of this retention was to do with motherhood, so where the explicit link was between motherhood. And what you can see there is that 36% of the respondents who stayed in teaching explicitly indicated a reason connected to motherhood that had influenced them to remain. So when they were mothers, they were saying that it was their motherhood was a part of the reason they wanted to stay in teaching. And that was either because of compatible childcare logistics around their school day, some sort of family context that enabled them to make that shift easily, or that they had used kit days or professional development whilst they were on maternity leave to maintain that motivation, that engagement with their role. Now, I think it's important to understand that childcare obviously is very individual to each other's circumstances, but actually when we think about the wider economy, we think about the lessons that all industries have learned from being in lockdown and from being in COVID. Helping to make those childcare patterns work is partly an employer's responsibility. And from an employer's perspective, from a school's perspective, it's about knowing what it is that your colleagues need, that your staff need, asking them what's going on with their childcare when they return, and what will help them to manage that childcare effectively. Some of it will be stuff that they need to talk about at home with partners or nannies or nurseries or their grandparents, for example. But some of it will be things that employers can offer in terms of flexible starts, flexible finishes, or making sure that the payments are covering their childcare costs, because actually in some cases people are paying to go back to work, which is quite shocking. So the other thing is making sure that employers are following good practice when it comes to kit days. So paying for kit days, offering those kit days, ensuring they can be done flexibly, welcoming babies onto site if need be, and also paying a kit day rate that's their annual salary divided by 195 rather than 365 to make sure that that is worth it. So contracted hours of 195 rather than days in the year of 365. When we looked at flexible working and how much of that was a retainer for women who had stayed in teaching, we found that 27% of respondents had chosen the option of flexible or part-time arrangements as a reason that had helped them to stay in the classroom. And of those, about 17%, oh no, I'm not sure what that says, 11% I think also chose a reason connected to motherhood. So flexible working, often we think it's something for mothers, but actually flexible working within that age bracket seems to be something that's welcomed beyond just mothers. Maybe women who want to do other things with their time, maybe study, or are looking after elderly parents, or have other responsibilities or other interests outside of school, that actually they get to that 30 to 39 age bracket and think, I don't want to be just doing school anymore. And I know that I'm preaching to the converted here, but essentially with flexible working, make it work for your staff, and you will retain experienced and qualified staff. It's an absolute no-brainer on that front. So when we're looking at these women who have left teaching age 30 to 39, again, there are some surprises, but not particularly many surprises when we look at the top 5 reasons they are leaving. It's similar reasons that we find across the board, regardless of age or gender, when teachers are leaving. Workload is the biggest issue for teachers in this age bracket. And then real sort of decision making around lifestyle choices. So getting to this age bracket and thinking, this is not what I want my life to look like anymore. I want to work less. I want to do different things. I want a better balance. And actually having the empowered sense of self to say at that age, I just don't want to do this anymore. Mental health and well-being was a huge part of the interviews, particularly as well when we started to drill down to them, just getting to a point where women felt they couldn't go on anymore, or evaluating what it was that made them feel happy and finding that it wasn't teaching. And then when we look at the number 4, that's where we start to see this connection with the motherhood penalty. So 42% of people saying that because of their family commitments, their children, that was a big factor influencing them to leave. And again, school culture. So if you are working in a horrible place with very high levels of workload that's having an impact on your mental health, and actually the choices between school and your children, again, you're just not going to choose a horrible place to work, are you? So you're going to choose your children. I think the reasons, the 6th, 7th and 8th reasons are also quite interesting as well. The pressure from educational monitoring bodies or school management. So if SLT are not kind and they're not nice, then that makes an impact. Or if there's an overemphasis on Ofsted, that influences teachers to leave. But again, that lack of flexible part-time working arrangements and the childcare logistics that don't match up. A third of teachers are saying that part of the reason they left was because their childcare logistics did not match up to the school day. So I suppose, again, for school leaders, key questions to be asking ourselves on the back of this is which aspects of our workload are impacting on your colleagues' other priorities. So which parts of their job, if they were forced to make the choice, they wouldn't choose that part of their role, they'd choose their children. So it's not the thing that gives them that buzz of being in the classroom, it's the mundane, bureaucratic, sort of soul-destroying parts of the job. How do you reduce workload in your setting without sacrificing outcomes for students? And did colleagues actually enjoy working at your school? And how do you know what is nice or horrible about working at your school? And essentially, if it's a horrible place to work, how do you go about changing that so that you retain these staff who are saying they're making a choice between their children and working for you and your school? Now, when we looked at specifically the connection between motherhood as a reason for leaving teaching rather than the more generic idea of women aged 30 to 39, we had 3 options on the survey that indicated that the respondents were mothers, either family commitments, children, childcare logistics, or maternity and paternity leave. And what we found, which was the data that we were really going for to try and find out, was that half of the teachers who are leaving in this age bracket are leaving because they are mothers, or a reason that is linked to their motherhood. And so I think if you're looking at your school circumstance and you're asking yourself, if a teacher is forced with the decision to choose my school or their family, why would they choose my school over their family? And how do you make it possible to not give them that choice and not force them to spend more time at school or prioritize school over the thing that they are really love, which is their family? And the interesting one, that idea of 10% of respondents were saying that it was the return from maternity leave that influenced their decision to leave. What is it like to return from mat leave in your school? What experience do teachers have when they come back from that extended period off, particularly at the minute where a lot of our teachers who are returning will have had more than potentially 12 months off because they were isolating during COVID. So some of our teachers have had 18 months since they've actually been in a classroom, and what's that experience going to be like for them coming back? We looked at flexible working again, because we know that's a huge crossover with our MTPT audience and also the women-ed audience. And a third of teachers who responded to this survey were saying that lack of flexible working opportunities or flexible working done badly encouraged them to leave the classroom. But actually only a small percentage of those teachers were mothers, well, explicitly indicated that they were mothers who had a poor experience or lack of flexible working. So there's an indication there that, again, that flexible working is not just for mothers. Not all mothers want flexible working. It's about how that flexible working is offered and how full-time working is offered, and whether full-time working is actually compatible with what they want to do at home. But a big message that we found from the interviews was that if you don't work, if you don't offer flexible working, staff leave. And if you do flexible working wrong, staff leave. So we heard lots of things for things like part-time wage on full-time hours. You need to make sure that your colleagues are doing part-time hours on a part-time wage, and you're not asking more of them. We need to make sure that we're paying TLRs properly. So if they're doing the full TLR on 0.6, they get paid the full TLR. Or if you're only willing to pay them 0.6 of that TLR, then the rest of it is distributed somewhere else. So they're not expected to do the whole responsibility and not get paid for it. And also making sure that at every stage of the game, there is part-time leadership and progression opportunities, both as a retention measure and a progression measure for colleagues that you already work with, but also as a recruitment measure for new staff coming into your school. So advertising every single role as flexible working considered for the right candidate. And that's a great phrase to use. It doesn't tie you in as a school, but it does attract fantastic quality candidates to your roles. So those are the headlines of the reports, and we'll be delving into them in much more detail as we get to grips with the 80 interviews. We'll be providing fortnightly and monthly reports on our research page as a subscription. We're calling it Light Research. And the way we intend to get deeper into those findings is that we're going to deal with each demographic at a time. So mothers who have left teaching, and then women who have left teaching more generally in this 30 to 39 age bracket, mothers who've stayed in teaching, and then women who have, or that should say stayed in teaching, sorry, that last bullet point. And we're launching that this weekend and next week. So after, because we wanted to make sure that we presented to you guys first. And on the back of all this research as well, we've designed four workshops responding to some of the needs that came out. So if you are listening to this and thinking, gosh, we really need to address some of these issues in our school, we offer what's called a life-friendly leadership workshop, a return to work workshop for teachers for line managers who are receiving staff back. We offer parental leave group coaching for colleagues on leave, and return to work workshops for colleagues who are going to step back into the classroom. And all of that can be found on our website at www.mtpt.org.uk/CPD-workshops. And you can see down in the bottom of the screen there at Maternity CPD on Twitter with the hashtag MTPT project. And again, that is some information about the Light research, we're calling it, subscription, where you can find out more about this research that we're doing and read a monthly report, as well as some bonus reports that we've got about UK parent teachers based on some of the data that we hold as the exclusive charity looking at this demographic. So that's it, Palm. Thanks very much for having me, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to present that research. You heard it here first.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. I can't believe you didn't say you were a researcher. That was just exceptional detail on something that we use. You're right. We talk about that statistic so often, don't we, with Women Ed? And it kind of pops up here, there, and everywhere. But you know, to do the deep work that you've done is brilliant. And am I right in thinking you've moved to France?
Yeah, so we relocated. My husband is French, so there is a connection. So MTPT full time, but it is ironic that that I'm one of those statistics now, which is I'm 30, 34, so bang smack in the middle of leaving.
Absolutely. Is it going well?
It's beautiful, yeah. You can't complain. Look at it's 23 degrees today, so you know, and I had baguette and jam for breakfast, so really can't complain.
It's really not that nice here in Jersey, I have to say. Thank you so much for your excellent research. It would be really useful if you could put the details of those workshops, just your web address in the chat, just so that if there is anyone who would like to catch up with that later. And I thought what was particularly interesting for me is also something else that has resonated this morning, is that some of those reasons, those top 5 reasons that women are leaving, is because of values, about the values of the school. And again, you know, schools talk about values and they talk about being family friendly, and yet so many aren't. They don't live them, do they?
What's really interesting is that so many of those reasons for leaving are very common across the age bracket, but there was a real sense of the straw that broke the camel's back. So all these very complex reasons, a period of maternity leave being this time away, this revolutionary moment where you think, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to put myself through this anymore. And actually having a huge driver not to is really powerful. And if you don't have that period of mat leave, there are very few opportunities to really take more than the 6 weeks out over the summer holidays and have that period of evaluation and say, God, is this where I'm aligned? Is this what I agree with? The curriculum changes in 2016-17 had a big impact on some of our interviewees, and this idea that they just realised they didn't agree with some of the things that were going on in education anymore, and they didn't want to pursue that. And also the concept as well of looking at your own child and saying, I don't think I want to put them through this system that I'm a part of, and how can I marry up being a part of something that I disagree with and look my child in the face. So really, yeah, that value set really coming to the fore in this age bracket, and quite interestingly, where teachers weren't mothers, a lot of the reasons for leaving were either crisis points, very isolated things like being attacked in their settings or being abused for somehow in their settings, or just getting really exciting opportunities to study abroad or to go into different roles in research tanks, or undergoing IVF and having that as a very difficult experience, and again having that epiphany moment of I can't do this to myself anymore. So yeah, that value set really becoming important at this age bracket.
Brilliant, thank you. My husband just put the TV on in the background, so if you can hear lots of noise, I apologise. That was really, really thought-provoking, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Something about this age between 30 and 39, where women kind of start to find themselves, perhaps, and they start to work out who they are. And they kind of start to identify themselves, a bit like Gaia saying, she's in her 30s saying, I had to accept, this was part of me and I've got to own it. And I think that's perhaps that connection of those things coming together. But thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure there's lots of questions in the chat for you, lots of comments about your research. So well done, and thank you for presenting this morning.
Thank you, Emma. Really, really, really positive. So much resonated with me as well. And it was really funny, actually, because I've always been somebody that you kind of consider a workaholic, but it was funny that COVID, my youngest is 3, but during COVID, I felt like I had this extra wind of maternity just because I was getting to spend some real time with him at home and just seeing the difference in our relationship and the difference in him and how much he'd developed over that time. It was, it was just really, really interesting, actually.
And what's interesting there with that age, Natasha, is so the average age of the youngest child when teachers leave in that age bracket when they're mothers is 2. So there's something around sort of before the free childcare kicks in, sort of giving it a go, trying their best to get back to work and getting maybe something about the terrible 2s, just that was the average age range. The majority of people had left their children, the youngest child was 2 at the time that they left. So what are we doing in those first 2 years to support women to get over that quite difficult period sometimes of parenthood?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. There's lots and lots of comments in the chats there with people. It's really kind of shook me up a little bit, actually. Just and the whole flexible working actually is obviously one of the Women Ed campaigns as well, but just as a head teacher in a school, really having to think about what I'm doing and holding myself to account and thinking about how am I actually making sure it's as easy as possible, and not just tooting the whole we've got flexible working, but actually what are we actually doing about it? And
and I think I'm going to take the opportunity to just do a bit of a watch there, though, because a lot of the broader sector, so sort of across other industries, flexible working, whilst it is great, it's also a huge contributor to the gender pay gap and the sort of the gap that goes after women's first children. And so as much as it is helpful to women, it's helpful to women because there is still this assumption that they have other things that they need to do, i.e. childcare, domestic responsibilities, caring responsibilities for older parents. They're doing, women on average do 16 hours of housework a week, men do 6 when they're in a heterosexual couple. And so whilst flexible working is really powerful, I think a more powerful question is how does our school enable everybody to work full time, because we are giving them the time to do those other things, and not saying, well, we allow women to work part time because obviously they are doing this other job at home, and we don't have those conversations around fathers, and we don't have those conversations around men. If we were expecting men to be taking on an equal load of the childcare and the domestic work, we would be having the same conversations about enabling them to be at home more, but we don't. We think flexible working is good for women because they also need to look after their children, and actually we should be saying it's not women's job to look after their children, but our whole society, well, it is, but it's also their father's jobs or their other parent's job, whoever their other parent is, but our whole society is still driven towards this idea that childcare and domestic work is a woman's job when it's not.
That's so true, Emma, and I think a lot of it is just about inclusion and diversity, isn't it? And just actually ensuring that everybody's included in work and in everything. Excellent, thank you so much, Emma. And we are going to be moving on now to our final session this morning, which is our panel discussion. And as you know from our unconferences, our very many unconferences, we often have, sorry, Emma, you're still sharing your screen. If you could just stop doing that, that would be fab. Thank you. We have many panel discussions. Last year we had 4 different panel discussions. This year we have fewer, but this one is focused on one of our campaigns, which Natasha has mentioned already. I'm going to hand over to Natasha so that she can do the introduction on this one.
No worries, perfect. It was actually ended by you ever so well, because actually our panel discussion today is supporting and encouraging diversity in underrepresented groups in education, strategies for equity. And so we have Esther, who was in one country yesterday and now somewhere else today. Where are we? In Holland, Esther?
Yes, I've made it to Holland, thankfully. And I just found out that all the flights in Oman were cancelled this morning. So I literally just got out, thankfully.
Wow. Wow, that was lucky. Yeah. So there we go. So we have Esther, who's joining us. We've got Lisa in Canada, who I think has injected coffee. Did you say Lisa? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. And poor Lisa's going for the whole day, so I don't know how she's going to keep that up for the whole day. So just bear with her. And then Palm and myself. So Esther's going to open for us. You've just shared your screen, haven't you, Esther?
Yeah, I think so. Can you see that okay, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. And we've got lots and lots of really interesting information going out. We're going to be telling our stories, but we would really, really like the audience to get involved in this as well. So please, please, please add your comments to the chat. And Esther, I'm going to be quiet now because I talk too much. There we go.
Thank you so much, Natasha. So yeah, just to introduce, I think you know everyone already. So we've got Tasha, Palm, Lisa and myself. And I just wanted to talk through some of the reasons why this is such an important topic really, and why it needs to be looked at. So I know when I started doing work on this in the school, there was a whole question about what is equity? What does that mean? And why are we using that word equity? So we've got equality, which you can see in the diagram here, which everybody's got the equal opportunities. But as you can see, we need difference within that. Then we've got this equity where we're enabling and supporting people who are possibly at a disadvantage or starting later or etc. or need a little bit of help. That's sort of where we are now. But ultimately, what we really want is we want justice where we remove these barriers to any sort of progression or any sort of areas that we want to work in. So that's ideally where we want to get to. What we want to think about is what the research says. So the Guardian, the UCL University, and this was featured in the Guardian, that discussed the fact that a lot of schools in the UK and England have very, very little BAME teachers. And I know the term BAME is problematic, but it's used in a sort of generic sense for statistical data mainly. But it was saying that there's a lack of BAME teachers within the school, and then this in turn had an impact on leadership. So some of the key findings from this were that there were lots of different things like linked to racism, diversity and leadership, racial literacy of school leaders, but a lot of it was about the progression and key retention factors. And I think we're going to discuss some of this, and like Tash said, we're going to share some of our stories. But I know the last meeting, the last PD meeting that I had, where I was applying for a job and I didn't get the job. It was a deputy job and I didn't get it, and the response to the feedback to the response when I went for my PD meeting was like, what can I do to progress, what can I do, you know? And they were like, maybe your face just doesn't fit. And I was like, well, I don't really know what to do with that, because this is my face, and I wasn't sure what that meant. But that's a lot of the feedback, you know. It's like, what is it that we need to do? Is it something to do where I'm not the right fit for the school, or is it that I don't have the training? And when it came down to the specs, I had everything else, but it was I just not the right look that was needed, for example, or I didn't have the right background or pedigree, etc. So there were lots of challenges to this. And again, this is a very detailed report, and I'd like to share this. So I don't know if I can share my slides, or what I do is I'll share the links on Twitter as well. So if anyone is interested, they can just go onto my Twitter and I'll share some of these as well. So that with the report, what came out was some recommendations as well. So what we can do to support, and it was looking at leadership and progression into leadership. Also looking at things like when staff made claims about racism or any issues around that they were encouraged to identify those issues, and they were encouraged to report them. So that was another thing as well, how leaders felt or how staff felt in a school. And another recommendation was that teacher education programs should include things like racial justice in education for prospective teachers as well, just to equip people with the information. Interviews covered in this study, they suggested that SLT were really crucial in this role about creating the multicultural capital within ethnically diverse schools. So what came out was it was helpful if staff saw multicultural SLT. But I think that it goes beyond that as well, because we can't, you know, in certain schools and certain areas, we can't have everybody diverse. And that's one of the questions I want to pose later, is that, is visual diversity enough? Because it isn't just about what you look like, it's about your beliefs, about your values, and also about what you know as well, your own racial literacy. So it's not necessarily, you know, what you look like, what you represent, but how you embody that as an SLT, what your values are, and how you make sure that that's supported, to support all teachers, and especially within staff development. Something that's been quite key, and this is very interesting working in an international, so I work in a British school in an international setting, and you need to send your picture in with your application, etc. And there's been lots of talk about bias, unintentional bias, intentional bias, etc. When you're recruiting, and halo bias, you know, recruiting like for like, or someone that you think is like. So that's been quite an interesting topic. And Vivian discussed this in the TES in 2020, and gave some suggestions about what we can do to support the diverse recruitment and sort of reduce that the potential unintentional bias that may or may not be out there, but it was just what we can do. So leading by example, some of the language in recruitment adverts, for example, the interview, having a varied an interview panel so that people felt comfortable or represented within the interview panel, and also if people weren't successful, feedback to the applicants, and not saying that your face doesn't fit, giving constructive feedback and supporting them in that way as well. So just from an international setting as well, which I think is quite interesting to compare, but it is just saying that the international, this is another study that was done, and again, I'll share the link, but it's saying that the international school sectors have a considerable amount of work to really embrace the culture and really support international school leaders of different races and nationalities and genders. So that was really interesting. So this study looked at how people felt and whether they felt their race or their gender, etc., had an impact on their interview process and their progression in their given field. What's been very interesting, what's been very important is the value that a diverse team bring. So lots of studies been done around that, and this professor from Michigan discusses just how diverse teams are actually so important at bringing, and that's all diversity from across the whole board, about how you can just bring lots and lots of different values, different perspectives, and making teams much stronger. So the importance and value that brings to all leadership. And what I wanted to share as well, because I think one of the most difficult things, and I think it's been discussed before, like being what you can see or being what you can't see, for example. And this book was released by the NAHT. There's a PDF version of this as well. There's a link on here, but again, I'll share it. And it has been shared. I think Jill Berry shared it on Twitter as well quite a few times. But it's You Are Not Alone. And it's just a really valuable and lots of different examples of leadership journeys with different people and how they've gone through their leadership journeys as well. So I'm kind of using this opportunity to bring in, I don't know, Natasha or Palm or Lisa, if you've got any sort of stories or any experiences that you felt impacted you or impacted someone that you know, linked to this in your leadership journey. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in.
This is our opportunity to start talking, isn't it? I was mid-tweet when you said that, so you caught me. Gosh, I don't know. Do you want to stop sharing your screen and we'll get everyone up on the screen? That might be a good idea. But I think that point that you make about not being able to see it. If you can't see it, you can't be it. Which I think, you know, lots of people mentioned. I noticed Yamina tweeted that and said it in her discussion last week at Women Ed London. It's so true, isn't it? It really is, because you just don't put yourself into that position. I remember when I started teaching, how for me, I just thought, okay, I want to go to be a head of department. I don't really want to move beyond that. And that's just simply because I didn't see anybody who was more than that. And I think that kind of lack of visibility is crucial. And I've said this before, that the only people in my school that look like me are cleaners, and they work in the kitchens. And you think, well, you know, how am I going to ever aspire to be something more when that is all I can see?
And Palm, that's you as an adult with some, at least, kind of you know, experience. Imagine that for children. It's just, I actually saw a tweet yesterday actually, and it was a male teacher, and he'd basically, oh, we've lost Esther there, and he basically said, oh, there was a kid in his class and was basically taking the mickey out of other kids and basically said, oh, you're gay. Basically, he was just taking the mick. And the teacher said there was like a 3-second moment of like, how do I respond to this? And he basically said, well, do you know what, that offended me as well, because I'm gay. And it was that whole time. He's never, and he said it was a scary moment because he's never hidden it, but he's also not stood up and said, I'm gay actually, and this is offending me. And that's what he did in that moment. And that moment of, oh, have I done the right thing here? Haven't I done the right thing? But then he said the reaction from the class and the reaction from the other children was actually like, whoa. And this child was then like, oh, okay. And had said it had obviously come from home and conversations that he had had at home. And I think that like Esther had said there, it is about actually what are we seeing? What are we seeing in our schools? Do we have, you know, a range of visibility for everybody that's, you know, that children could come across, that could be that, because children will look and think, well, actually, is that person like me? And is this, you know, and for us as adults, you know, I had exactly the same situation as a child. There was like nobody Black in schools in general. We did have, in my primary school, I had one Black teacher, Miss Kissa-Konkoli. She was like, oh, honestly, I hope one day she hears this. And then I actually went on to be a teacher, and where I was working, and I ended up being seconded to a school, and she was working there, and she was like, Natasha, and I was like, oh my God, Miss Kissa-Konkoli, and everyone was just like, why are you so excited? I was like, she was one of my teachers. But the connection that I had with her, just because she was like one of my only experiences of having a Black teacher, was just like, whoa. And yeah, and it's honestly, it's just
but it's that thing of being visible, isn't it? It's because you see yourself in somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, Lisa, do you, I think, I don't know, it's slightly different, isn't it? Perhaps.
Well, I mean, I'm on the panel for, I think, a couple of reasons. One, the color of my skin means I have a responsibility to make sure that when, as a assistant principal helping the principal hire for open positions, that we look at who are our students and do we have a candidate that is reflected in our student population. I mean, I work in a very white neighborhood, but it's becoming less so, but the staffing demographic doesn't change. A part of the challenge is, and of course, this is where education programs come in, Black or brown students don't necessarily pursue education as a field, right? So we have to change the culture around who can be a teacher. Well, bloody well anybody can. So that's the one reason I'm here, is I have a responsibility because of my privilege and the ease that I've walked through life to make sure others have similar supports. But the second part, of course, is a lesbian, and I've never had to out myself in front of students necessarily. It's just something I grew into doing. But here's the difference, I suppose, is sitting at an interview with any number of candidates, I have never heard a candidate say at an interview, I'm gay or I'm lesbian. That's a difficult role to fill. You have to really build a culture where the gay and lesbian folks already on staff feel that it's safe for them to be who they are.
I think that connects, doesn't it, a little bit to the idea of kind of visible characteristics and invisible characteristics, and the idea that you know, for some of us it's there in your face, and in other ways it's much more subtle, much more difficult. Disabilities, for example, you know, they're not always visible, and how do you ensure that a school is inclusive, and also a leadership provides that visibility for all of that, so that you feel that, you know, you do have a place there. It's tricky. There was a statement, sorry, in the chat we had. Lauren said that she's the only Black member of staff in the school. There's literally just her, which, you know, I wonder, it would be interesting to know, Lauren, how that makes you feel. you know, does that change your kind of perception about how you interact within the school, or you know, does it make you feel that you don't belong? Because I think that's another aspect, isn't it? You know, we might not feel that necessarily that we belong. I'm glad we got Esther back. I was beginning to worry about her.
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, adding her in, etc. But Lauren, have to hide part of myself. Do you know what, Lauren? Like, it's so funny, okay, because I'm in an international school, and actually, there. I was speaking to my principal about this the other day, who is a middle-class white male, but is like the most supportive principal like ever. He's amazing. He's really, really encouraging. And I know I'm lucky to have this and be in this situation. But he was saying the other day that he was speaking to another teacher the other day, and we've got lots of new teachers coming, obviously, and it's a Black Muslim woman that came in, and one of the things that he said that he was really shocked at was she had said to him, oh yeah, well, I looked at the website to see what the team looked like, and he went, I couldn't believe she said that. And I went, yeah, I did the same thing. I said, you know, as a non-white person, one of the first things we do when we are looking for a new job or any school is I go onto the website and check the team. And I tell you something, if it hasn't got anybody that even remotely looks like me, I am not even applying, because I know full well that, do you know what I mean? I don't know. I know that there's going to be something. And like you're saying there, those microaggressions, little comments that are made or can be made, which things like, if I hear the word, you're so aggressive, one more time, like somebody said to me most recently, I was having a meeting, and honestly, it was really recently, and they said, oh, you intimidate me. And I was like, what, really? Like, okay, can you explain to me what it is? Couldn't explain it. Like, I was like, am I being really loud? Am I speaking for? Because we all have a bit of a complex anyway, because of being in this environment. You build this whole like, oh my gosh, I need to do things in a specific type of way. And actually, Hareen said it. She said that what was the word she used? I don't know. She basically she used a word that was much better than I'm going to use, but she just kind of like, she tones herself down a little bit, and I do it all of the time, and I can see Khadija saying the same thing there. You do it all the time. You tone yourself down. You can't be yourself. And amongst me and other Black teachers, honestly, we send each other memes all of the time where you're in the car and you're listening to music and you're just being yourself, and you're rapping, you got your earrings in, your hair's up in a ponytail, and literally as I walk into school, I'm like, right, let me put my face on now, let me do my whole, I'm toning myself down, I'm not going to be who I am. I go into school and pretend I'm somebody else, I'm not quite myself, and then literally I step, yes, Lauren, literally I step outside the door and my earrings are back in and my hair is out and I've got like J. Cole on in the car and I'm back to being myself again. And we all do it, and it's so horrible that we're talking about this. It's happening to all of us, but we all feel the same, that we can't actually really be our true selves. We can't be completely authentic when we are in these environments. We're having to constantly tone ourselves down, and that for me is just and that's because actually we just haven't got enough representation in the schools we're in where it's accepted. It's okay for us to be like this. Yeah, anyway, sorry, my rant.
That's right. I mean, Jill's just said about how she says that's exactly why we need to be there. You know, if there aren't people like us, that's exactly it. We need to be there. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's really interesting that point that you made, Natasha, because I think I've seen it somewhere. It's like, do I intimidate you or are you intimidated by me? And I think that's quite a difference. And it is like, where is the ownership of that? Because I don't feel I'm not doing anything that's intentionally intimidating. So what is it? What is it that you need? And I remember, I think we were in a meeting once, and I do get a bit passionate and my hands do start going, and someone said, oh, you're being aggressive. And it's like, well, I'm not actually, I'm just being, I'm not being aggressive. Like he said, the amount of time someone says to you that you're being aggressive because you're showing our passion about your teaching or the children that you're teaching, and you're like, no, I'm just really into my job and I really want to, do a good job. And that's what it is.
It's just crazy because it's kind of like the accepted norm, okay, that people are calm and they're, and everything's all like la 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 la, right? Fluffy. That is the phrase that I have, okay? I use the word fluffy a lot. But in my house, for example, everybody is loud. Everybody's talking over each other. Everybody is like screaming and shouting, and an argument is crazy from an outsider's perspective. For us, it's normal. We are loud. We do shout at each other. We do talk over each other. But this is our norm. This is our cultural norms. And it's where, you know, why is it not okay?
I think Nicola kind of touched on that because sorry, Lisa, I just interrupted, but Nicola just touched on that because she said that she feels she's got to tone herself down all the time. And I don't think it's necessarily, you know, yes, there is a cultural aspect to it. I think it's used as, like you say, a microaggression in a kind of culturally insensitive way. But often it's just about people feeling that they belong, that they feel that they can be who they are. And I think this is kind of at the heart of everything that we're saying, and goes back to values too, that ultimately leadership doesn't fit anyone. It doesn't fit, you know, it only fits a certain kind of person, and we're all shaping ourselves. We're trying to fit into this mold, to be like the leaders of old, you know, that kind of great man myth. And maybe that's the thing that we've really got to work on. That's where the deep work is these days. It's actually changing that perception of leadership, having visible leaders like you, Natasha, like you, Lisa, like you, Esther, who are there actually challenging those stereotypes and challenging those perceptions of what it means to be a leader.
Yeah, what I would say to that as well, Palm, is like, so Esther was obviously, me and Esther have worked together, and when I was applying for headships, I went for a number of roles, and Esther was somebody that was supporting me and just saying, you know what, it's all right, you know, just keep going, and then getting the headship that I have now was because of some of our conversations, Esther, wasn't it, where it was like, you know what, I'm not going to fit that mold, I'm going to be who I am, and I am who I am. And actually, when I spoke to my principal that obviously recruited me, and he was just like, I love your passion, I love the way you are, I love that you just straight, you say it how it is, and that's what he wanted. And actually, I was most probably potentially putting myself at a disadvantage by trying to fit into a mold that wasn't me anyway. And then as soon as I started to accept, you know what, this is how I am, this is the way I'm going to be, then I got a position, because I was confident in just saying, well, do you know what, this is you're gonna get what you're gonna get. And actually, if it's not okay, I will find somewhere that, you know, because actually I shouldn't be working in those places then, because you know, I can't remember who it was there that just said, it is exhausting, Nicola, it's exhausting trying to be something that we're not. And I still do find that you can't be 100%. But I don't know, I have hope though. I have hope that you know, things are changing.
I agree. I think we're in a time of change, and I think we're a time, like, I think there's been a lot of said of like values, people appreciating authenticity, and I think that's those two words, values and authenticity, have been kind of really powerful. And I think Angeline just said it here about it, and I think this is really important, and you mentioned this as well, Tash. It's not on people of colour or black, you know, to do the educating. And it's like you said, your principal kind of opened yourself up. And even like for me, you know, who was like, everybody can support everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not just black people supporting black people or ethnic supporting ethnics. It's like we all have a role to change this face. And I remember talking to you, Palm, last year and being quite pessimistic, but I think Women's Ed as a platform is such an amazing place. And I've shared this screen here because if you go on Twitter, there are so many parts of the community that are supporting, you know, just people like teachers, leaders, and allowing people to have that platform. And it's like, you know, it's okay to be like this. It's okay to be your authentic self, because there are other people like you, or people who support you or agree with you. And like, I think Joel Berry just, you know, commented, and she's been a real advocate for this. So, and I think it is amplifying voices around you, supporting leaders around you, be them, you know, above you, to the side of you, below you, whoever, like all around you, you know, and really, giving people an opportunity to be their authentic self, whatever that is.
But also bringing that into schools and making it visible everywhere, you know, so that it isn't just necessarily at one particular level, but actually it's everywhere, you know, that inclusivity that, you know, it's just fantastic over the last year or so to, you know, ever since George Floyd, to have had those conversations about diversity and inclusion and equity, and actually to have those really uncomfortable conversations that have kind of, you know, uncovered some really uncomfortable stuff. I was having a chat with Tash yesterday about DEI work that we've been doing at my school, and it's kind of raised some really uncomfortable things, but also things that I think other people can't see, because they're not of colour, you know, or because they're not of, you know, because they're not gay, or because they're not, do you know what I mean? You know, you're not seeing it from somebody else's perspective, and you just need someone else to open that door for you and actually allow you to see it.
Absolutely. And I think it's just so great that people are having these conversations. And I think it is starting points because, like you said, people are at very different stages of their awareness and understanding of it. And if it's something that doesn't impact you directly, it's not your fault if it's not on your radar, really. Do you know what I mean? So it's having these conversations, it's talking to each other, everybody, and really just opening up. And I think listening to people and talking to people is a great way to start, for sure.
This is it's so important for me to be here because, you know, sometimes, not sometimes, you know, it's a checkbox, right? So I'm an assistant principal, a team of 3, and I think we're doing great things when we look at candidates who don't look like us. We're a white admin team. But at the same time, there's always that, and I'm gonna put it right out there because this is what has to be said, right? Like this is the white woman's struggle, the white man's struggle, the white person's struggle. Well, yes, we should hire a Black teacher, but they should sound like we sound. So what, Natasha, you were just saying about you have to tone yourself down, or like, we have to just, it like sitting here, I'm thinking, Lisa, like, well, what I do is I sit at these panels, I listen and I move forward because I'm not doing anybody any service. I'm not doing my students any service. If I check box, yes, I have a Black staff member, but she sounds just like me, right? Because the accent piece, right? You know, we put so many barriers in the way. Well, we can't hire this one because the kids won't understand. What? Like, what do we want?
Do you know, Lisa,
we want people cut out in cardboard, but of different color cardboard. They all have to sound like I sound, and they can't have had any different experiences. And if we do hire a gay person, well, they can't be, you know, the flamey gay person because we don't want that. Like, boom, we have to remove these chain link fences we've got around each other and lead together and walk alongside. But this is, sometimes I wonder, what the heck am I doing sitting on this panel? But this is why.
That's exactly why. Absolutely. We need you. But I was just, I mean, absolutely that, Lisa, because that point about, you know, so often the decision about who recruits is in the hands of the head teacher or the chair of governors or whatever it is. And so often people will say to you, oh, you didn't get that, but look, you know, that you just didn't fit for that time, you know, and so often that's the case. And I think this is that concrete ceiling that we're seeing for that intersectionality that we've got for women, in that they don't fit that mold. They're not somebody they think they're going to work with. They're not somebody that they think that they fit the team, like you say. And all of that is about speech. It's about the way you look. It's about the way you dress. It's about the views that you present on even those impartial kind of, you know, little conversations that you might have at break time when you're on an interview. All of that's being tested and checked. And, you know, you can't be yourself. It's absolutely true. You cannot be yourself.
Imagine our kids, right? So we struggle hiring a Black woman who has a African accent. But we have kids in our school, in our classes, that have just moved from Africa. And we have ELL classes, we have extended supports. But what are the things we're not saying? Like, what are people saying behind closed doors? And my God, I hope they're not saying them out loud to the kids. Like, if we're putting barriers in front of adults from working in our schools, what are we doing to the kids? Because that's why we in Calgary don't have Black teachers to hire. Right? Like, because I mean, I would love to have more Black teachers, more brown teachers, but they're not here. But they're not here because maybe they're going to international schools like Natasha, right? Maybe the kids aren't getting the message that, yeah, you can be. You can be a teacher, but my rant is over.
No, but it is so true, and it is what is it we're not saying by doing that? And that is the big question that schools need to really start reflecting on. And I know internationally, and actually Palm, you in Jersey as well, actually, you're doing the same DEI courses and stuff that we're doing internationally. And actually it's just bringing it to the forefront for adults to actually really start looking at and challenging themselves. Little things like, you know, your recruitment, and like Esther said, what actually, so I specifically, if there was a line in any of the adverts that said we welcome applicants from then I was like, yeah, at least I've kind of got a chance there. Do you know what I mean? Things like, you know, just representation in the curriculum and what we're delivering to children, those kinds of conversations. I've been looking on Twitter actually recently, and parts of America where they've been banning lots and lots of children's books that I was nearly crying the other day, because they had children outside the school protesting some of the books that had been banned off of the book lists in schools. And I'm like, well, this is like a picture book, but it had Black children in it. Please explain this to me. And there was one, I think it was a Chinese, I might be wrong here. And anyway, she's now one of, like, I don't know, in the top 8 book lists, because everyone went, you know what, forget you, I'm going to go and buy her book and give them out to free to schools, because I'm just shocked at, I suppose, what's going on in some places, and the fact that, like, there's this big, I don't know, drive for not having equality, but then actually schools are trying, and it's better than it was. That's why I say I have hope, because it's better than it was. These conversations are now happening, which they weren't before.
And that is absolutely the key there, Tasha. We're going to have to pull this together, I think. As much as I would love it to
talk for hours, couldn't we?
I know we could probably talk for hours, but we need to give everyone a break before the next session.
It's been great. Thank you guys so much. I think
thank you.
I covered everything that I wanted to say, but thank you. I just wanted to raise one point, because this was a really important point that I went to a webinar the other day, and there's been this whole talk about belonging, and that we need to create a space for belonging. But I think the question is, belonging to what? And it's like, I think that, you know, Liz posted something about the fact that the heads, and, you know, 100% male, white, and it's like, and I think this is what you were saying, Lisa, what are we belonging to? Are we belonging to this old kind of idea of what it is to be a head or a leader, or are we trying to break that ceiling and create and disrupt and create this, you know, this, what we are, trying to be authentic and us, and this is the future.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Well done, Liz's. Definitely.
Yeah. Liz is switch. I'm sure she'll have a lot more to say about that when she's on later.
Guys, thank you so much. I think that was a really nice way to end this session, actually. So the next session is at 1:30, and you have Lisa and you have me for a little while, just because you're right there, Lisa. You are coming.
No, I was going to say that's 6:30 in the morning. Actually,
6:30 in the morning for you, 1:30 for the UK, and what time is it for me? 3:30 for me. I'm not going to reel out all of the different time zones, but definitely 1:30 p.m. in the UK. Braver in the workplace is our heading for the next session. Lisa and I will start you off. Well, Lisa will be doing the intros, I'll be on tech, and then Vivian will come and take over from me. So I cannot wait.
Tasha, sorry, I was going to say hold on, because we were going to get Jill and Victoria on. Because we've got 2 people viewing.
Jill, I'm going to add you to the
viewers today, who are actually who have been to all 7 unconferences. Now I know that there are many, many more of you, so my apologies for not shouting you out. But we just wanted to bring 2 people on who have been there right from the very start, and have watched these unconferences develop, watched the whole network develop over time. Just wanted to get a few reflections really from them in these few minutes before the end. Hi, Jill.
Victoria, I'm just adding you as well. Sorry.
Are you finding her?
Yeah, there we go.
Excellent. Right, cool. So how have you found it? How's the session been, and your thoughts?
It's just been absolutely brilliant. I'm just so energized by it. I always find the unconferences really energizing. They give me a huge lift, and it's really brilliant. Hi, Vic, to think about how things have evolved over the 7 years, you know, we are not just having the same conversations, things have moved on, and in such a positive way and such a hopeful way. So it's fantastic. I couldn't be here last night because I had another commitment last night. I'm popping in all over the weekend, but I've really enjoyed what I've managed to see this morning. So just well done to everybody. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you. We're amazing because of you. Vic, what are your thoughts about how
My
it's
thoughts,
changed?
this is all a bit last minute appearing, and I have already apologised for my bare face. But actually, I wouldn't have done that about 7 years ago. I would not have appeared like this with no makeup on, just like being authentically myself, which was just being discussed. But let me just read something to you, because I sent an email to Kezia just before that unconference because I was desperate to go to it. And I said, sadly, I'm too late to book a place for the unconference. Like, will there be other events, etc.? I'm asking. I'm very keen to network with other female leaders, as I sometimes feel a bit isolated in my senior role and aspirations to develop my career. Now, actually, as I read that, it almost brings me to tears because I remember the place that I was at, and it wasn't a good place because I was feeling really isolated. I wasn't actually even that new to the area where I'd moved, but a few years in, and I had 2 young children. But my whole sort of career had kind of come to a bit of a grinding halt, and my self-belief and confidence was rock bottom. And then I read an article in TES, and it was one that Kezia had written, and then it had mentioned about the unconference, and I thought, my word, I've got to go. And then I couldn't get a ticket. But then she contacted me to say, no, we've had a cancellation, here's a ticket. And I went along, and the world just opened up. I met Jill. We drew trees on a wall together. Do you remember?
Shirley Drummond's session. I hope Shirley Drummond manages to see this. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I remember our trees.
Yeah, and it was kind of like the tree growth for me. I don't want to make this all about me because it isn't all about me, but the power of Women Ed, it did so much for me personally, but then what I've been myself been able to do is actually support others and you know, the whole lifting up and working together in collaboration. And it's very, very special. And Jill, just to let you know, I'm looking this way because she's down there on my screen. Your book, You're Taking a Leap, which has really helped me. I've recently lent it to a colleague, and as she's reading it, she's saying to me, oh, wow, this is incredible. And she said it's really calming her and really giving her the confidence to make that leap. Anyway, she's made the leap and she's got a head teacher post.
Oh, that's excellent. And when you lend the book to somebody, it's such a compliment. You know, you're kind of saying you had the potential to do this. So it's all pay it forward.
Yeah.
Keep paying it forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on at the last minute.
Not at all. I am in my pajamas.
You can't tell.
And
You
I
both
know
look
it's
beautiful. I
12.
think Christine said that you look beautiful without your makeup. You're fine.
Absolutely. And do you know what,
Thank you.
you're just opening there with feeling energized. That's exactly how I feel attending these. It's, you know, you're sitting there and then you just have so much inspiration, and it kind of just gives you a new like kick into gear again, doesn't it, when you're feeling a little bit low?
Absolutely.
That's definitely how I feel, definitely.
Yeah. Although I couldn't sleep last night. I was saying I couldn't sleep last night because I was buzzing so much from the inside of last night. But yeah, I think I'm feeling it now. I might be like
you can sleep. You can sleep later.
Yeah, you sleep really well tonight then.
Right, drinks coffee.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been fantastic to have you all with us this morning. And the afternoon session kicks off at 1:30. There is another link for that session. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Esther for the sparking that panel discussion. Thank you to everyone this morning. So much discussion about values, about owning our bravery, which has inspired many. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.